Hold up a moment. This thing might take a while. Oh, my freaking ass. Is this honestly... Is it bad or... Oh no, it was just the studio mode. I was moving in slow motion on my screen. Anyway. This is, we're back. We're back with whatever there is to be back. I mean... Am zis că ne uităm în timp ce mănânc salată de vinete. Am zis că ne uităm la niște videouri. In case you don't know me. Hello. Sunt Alex. Am obținut masterul de dezvoltare internațională și managementul afacerilor globale în cadrul Facultății de Științe ale Guvernării și, mă rog, atunci se numea Științe Politice, Filozofie și Științe ale Comunicării, acum se numește Științe ale Guvernării, Științe ale Guvernării și Comunicării. Și asta îmi place să fac. Politică. Political stuff. I like to talk about it. Îmi place să mă implic as much as I can. Nu în vreun partid politic sau ceva de genul acesta, ci pur și simplu, cel puțin nu încă. And I've never been in a political party before. Dar momentan, cât se poate să fiu as much as I can be socially involved and help others. I fight for decency, mă consider de stânga, din perspectiva spectrului politic. So, asta e just so you know, pentru că nu cred că am zis asta în niciunul din celelalte basically videouri pe care le-am mai pus pe YouTube și pe toate cele. Am uitat să schimb data, că sunt în 2024. Nice, frate, nice. Azi e de fapt 4 a 1-a, a 4-a, bravo, 4 a... Bro, can you even type? Oh my days. What have I done? I forgot. Oh my god, și încă nu pot să schimb asta. Ah, ce tare. A trecut un an și încă nu știu să folosesc Twitch-ul. Mă rog, nu Twitch-ul, OBS-ul, da, în fine. Da. Și titlul nu e cel de sus cu Palestina, oameni, fapte, cifre. Ăsta, de fapt, actually, let me... Să avem asta pe fundal în timp ce... Nu, o să-i dau mute la asta. Și noi o să ne uităm la Our Boy Overzealots. Actually, I messaged him. I mean, I tagged him in one of my stories and he responded kindly saying thanks for me supporting his video and his channel. He's a very cool guy. If you resonate with what not anti-capitalism, but you know, a very strong position against the modern day capitalism and how capitalism came to be, because we together, I think me and him, we embrace socialism as it is. You can go and check him out because he's pretty much a very chill dude. Now my face is gonna go boom boom because of the lighting. There we go. So we're gonna watch a little bit of his video, and not a little bit, I mean, I think pretty much all of his video, and then watch another one, and then we'll see if this friend of mine that I was telling you about earlier is gonna join or not. Acum, eu vorbesc în engleză nu pentru că, din nou, mi-a mai scris cineva la un moment dat, ești român, vorbește română, cu respecte, fuck off. Vorbesc cum vreau să vorbesc. Dacă nu îți place și nu înțelegi, you can ask me on stream. Și o să răspund în engleză, română, poate reușesc în franceză, portugheză, whatever you wanna call it. Încerc să prind. Am prieteni care se uită la mine și care sunt și din afara țării și poate că vor să mă înțeleagă mai bine decât dacă vorbesc română doar. Și atunci audiența mea nu este doar pentru România, mai sunt și câteva persoane din afară care ascultă. Și a căror părere și a căror, nu știu, prezență vreau să o mai am aici. Nu vreau pur și simplu să stau să vorbesc română. Thankfully, ei cât de cât au reușit să învețe română. Așa că dacă noi am avut engleză obligatorie la școală, I believe, pentru că ei nu au avut română obligatorie la școală, evident de unde sunt ei. Atât pot să fac și eu măcar. Să mai switch-uiesc, să mai folosesc o engleză, să mai ceva, să mai... Ok, bun. Now that we got that out of the way, pot să consider cringe, whatever. I honestly don't give a shit. Deci, proof of Israel's genocide intent. Ăsta e unul din videoclipurile de la Overzealots care pe mine cel puțin m-a făcut să mă uit și mai adânc în conflictul ăsta, pentru că eu am vrut să-mi fac o dizertația pe tema asta, but I didn't manage to do it. In the sense that I wasn't necessarily allowed to do that. So, let's... este case sensitive, politică și altele. Let's leave it like that. Okay. Here we are. Dacă nu ascultăm pe lo-fi, o să ascund un pic. So, let's go. Here's the video.
A few weeks ago, Amnesty International put out a 269-page report detailing the atrocities committed against the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Okay, wait. Subtitrări? Română. Just in case. Should I put English? No.
Report is very dense and well-researched, and Amnesty International uses it to argue that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. I understand that not everyone has the time to go through a 296-page report, so I thought I would do it for you and share what I consider to be the most damning evidence and arguments levied against Israel. I still recommend you read it for yourself if you have time. It's very heavy and hard to stomach, but this is the first time a major human rights organization has accused Israel of the crime of crimes. But if you can't, I'll do my best to fill you in. This video will not be monetized, partly because I don't want an ad to interrupt these serious topics, and partly because it will be highly derivative of the Amnesty International report with many references and direct quotes. I'll just be relaying the information to you and sprinkling in my opinions where appropriate. So let's do that. We're going to start by looking over Israel's obligations under international law, then move on to defining genocide, and finally, we will take a look at the Israeli authorities' actions, lack of actions, and dehumanizing genocidal statements against Palestinian people.
Deci, practic, videoclipul ăsta este despre, care menționează faptul că pentru prima dată de când conflictul ăsta a început, a apărut un report în care o organizație, una dintre, și cred că sunt și altele care susțin documentul ăsta și care au aderat, să zicem, într-un fel la el, ideea că Israel comite genocid, cea mai mare crimă dintre crime și că tortură, efectiv toate chestiile astea și este acuzată de aceste lucruri. This is big. This is freaking big. And the reason this is freaking big is because Israel has been doing this for a while now. It's been doing this for almost a year. Now, if you look in the past, al doilea război mondial, Second World War, just check how many years have passed since you know who started doing you know what to basically Jews. And then compare it to this. Of course, remove the gas chambers, because there's no, at least, thank God, there's no gas chambers here. But there's bombing, so here we go.
Although it may not seem like it, Israel does have obligations under international humanitarian law, including the law of occupation as the occupying power in both the West Bank and Gaza. International humanitarian law, or the law of war, binds all parties to an armed conflict with the goal to limit human suffering by balancing military necessity with human well-being. It aims to protect sick and injured civilians, captured combatants, and so forth. In addition to looking out for civilians, these laws regulate the means and methods of warfare and impose obligations on military occupiers. The principal instruments of international humanitarian law are the four Geneva Conventions of 1949 and their 2 additional protocols of 1977. Israel is a party to the Geneva Conventions, but it hasn't ratified the protocols. Nonetheless, it remains bound by the rules that form part of international customary humanitarian law. In Gaza, Israel is considered the occupying power under international law due to its significant control over Gaza's borders, airspace, and access to resources. It's true that Israel pulled its presence out of Gaza in 2005, but instead of allowing for meaningful autonomy for the people of Gaza, Israel's presence moved just outside the perimeter and continued tight control. Israel still remained as the occupying authority. Under the laws of war, Israel's obligations are as follows. They must distinguish between civilians and combatants and only target legitimate military objectives. They must prioritize proportionality, meaning avoiding attacks where civilian strife would be excessive relative to the anticipated military advantage. And they must take the necessary steps to minimize harm to civilians and civilian objects. International human rights law remains applicable even during armed conflict to ensure the protection of civilians' rights. The Fourth Geneva Convention imposes specific obligations on an occupying power, requiring it to provide special protection and humane treatment to the inhabitants of the occupied territory, who are considered protected persons. These individuals are protected against all acts of violence, threats, torture, and other ill treatment, and they must be treated humanely at all times. As the occupying power, Israel bears responsibility for the welfare of the population under its control, including maintaining law and order and ensuring the provision of basic necessities. The Hague Regulations, which Israel has not ratified, but nonetheless the Israeli High Court has found to be part of customary international law and...
Because guess what? Some countries don't like when international organizations to abide by some rules, like known rules for everyone. So basically, when Israel is being told, pull out of there, or please make sure you respect international treaties and international obligations like every other occupier needs to, because why the fuck did we do all of these things? Like shaking hands, signing papers, solving conflicts in the past, with these resolutions ending the conflicts, right? Like the, as you can see, Geneva Conventions, the Hague Regulations, yeah. So, international humanitarian law, why the freaking ass does it exist? If nobody cares about it, what the... Everybody can do whatever they want, apparently, without being taxed for it, or at least some of it. Because apparently, if just because a state is our ally, like political ally, how this is a very red line to cross. Like the European Union, for example, still supports Israel, and I've seen a comparison within the US that literally the money that the US could have used to make education free, offer, like, solve homelessness and hunger, double that money, and they send it to Israel. Like, they could have easily solved 3 of the biggest issues of the United States: homelessness, hunger, like people living in hunger, and so not poverty, but hunger, and school, like education. They could have solved it, but yet they decide to offer these money to a state that commits crimes. Romania shook hands, and I'm saying Romania because our prime minister was elected, not elected, but proposed by the president, and it got to a rotation, blah blah blah, etc. They are representatives of us, right? No matter what you were saying, political class represents the people that voted for them. So the fact that the prime minister went in and shook hands with Netanyahu makes us complicit to that genocide. The fact that the EU is still funding and defending, vividly defending, Israel is also, in my opinion, making us all complicit. Well, thankfully, there are countries such as Spain and Portugal and Ireland, and I think someone else, but I'm not. I cannot remember. But the Pope, actually, who kind of started to condemn them and, yeah, impose some sanctions or something, or take them to court or something like that. How are they getting away with it? I am just in disbelief.
Binding on all states, including the ones who never ratified, states the following. Article 43 says that the occupying power shall take all the measures in his power to restore and ensure, as far as possible, public order and safety while respecting, unless absolutely prevented, the laws in force in the country. Article 56 of the Hague Regulations prohibits seizure, deliberate destruction, or intentional damage done to institutions dedicated to culture, religion, education, charity, history, and so forth. Keep this in mind because, as we will see, Israel not only brazenly disobeys these rules that its own high court considers to be binding, but IDF soldiers document themselves doing so while laughing at and mocking the destruction. This sentiment is also present in Article 53 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which states that Israel, as the occupying power, cannot destroy Palestinian homes or properties unless it is militarily necessary to do so. As this video progresses, we will see a
Unless it is military necessary to do so. And they are doing that because they can just... The fact that that paragraph exists allows Israel to invoke Hamas being there as a motive. So they can use that as their reason to bomb and destroy. Because that paragraph exists there, probably. I presume that's the only way, because otherwise... I believe they would be sanctioned if you remove that paragraph in and just let it, like, they cannot destroy this and that, and they cannot attack this and that, or starve the population, or literally bomb the population, or like take the medical facilities away from the population and everything like that. What the hell is going on with this country? Like, with this, with the so quote unquote leadership of Israel. What the hell is going on?
good many instances where military necessity was lacking, yet destruction took place regardless. I know this part of the video is tedious and could possibly bore some people, so I'm going to wrap it up quickly by listing off a few more of Israel's obligations and acts to avoid under international law.
It's great to have
wanton
as a
destruction
base.
of Palestinian properties not justified by military necessity constitutes a war crime and violates the Geneva Conventions. Deportation or forced transfer of populations is prohibited unless absolutely necessary for civilian safety or military operations, and even then, the occupying power must ensure adequate living conditions for the displaced and ensure they return safely to their homes once hostilities cease. Israel must provide food and medical supplies to Gaza and facilitate humanitarian aid under Articles 55, 56, and 59.
So obviously they did not do that. And I'm looking at this, and I'm gonna say, with a straight face, how a war should be carried on if you want to do that for some weird reasons. Not when I say weird, I'm not saying it as like I'm a child that doesn't understand that there are resources in the world, that are greedy people in the world that are no. I understand these things, and I understand that they have plans to like extend their territory, or not objectively, but subjectively, like spread around and get their ideas going, or manipulate people, or I don't know, steal some resources, get access to some land that they would probably boost their whatever economy. I understand these things. I just think they are not worth it. I just don't see them worth it. I think that if you go to like this far, to up to like killing people and doing this amount of bad things to others around you, your country is illegitimate. Like to others. Like why the frick is Russia attacking Ukraine? I know the answer. You don't need to tell me because gas, because blah blah, because the US, because we are poking them with NATO. No, I am aware of those things, bro. Still, have we ever dropped a bomb on Russian territory. Ever. And I mean, ever since NATO, EU, and whatever else. NATO bombed wrongly, in my opinion. Of course, I mean, it was probably one of the atrocities that they have done as an alliance, and I do not stand by that. Like, whenever I'm saying NATO, I'm also condemning them for bombing Belgrade and whatever, Serbia and others that they did. But have we ever, as NATO, bombed Russia? Or have we ever, as NATO, apparently now, the UK, France, and the US are bombing Yemen. They are officially involved in the war. It's crazy. I don't see why a country would go this far with war. And again, I'm not talking about monetary advantages. I think those are not worth it. I don't think they're worth it. And if you think it's worth it for a country, even though their GDP might go up, or their population might get a little bit better economically and they can buy stuff and they can live, I don't think it's worth it on the long run. Bro, do you understand what it means to actually attack a country? Your legitimacy as a country goes down. The world tension goes up. You actually make everybody run away from you because guess what? Nobody wants to get killed. Nobody wants to get killed. Nobody wants to stay in a way. Nobody wants to stay near an aggressor. Everybody, when they see Israel, are gonna think, or at least I hope they're gonna think, oh shit, they were aggressors. We are not gonna go there to travel. We're not gonna go there to promote their tourism. We're not gonna go there to buy things from them. We're not gonna buy Israeli-made things. We're not gonna buy from Israeli-owned corporations. We're not gonna buy, we're not gonna support them in any way. Like, the same thing that the EU did to Russia should happen to Israel from all the countries around the planet. Because this is what a unified front means. But no, their interest, and when they say their major interest at play or in the middle or whatever, behind your back, they're playing, yeah, of course they are. Like, fuck, that is freaking obvious. But that is not the point. The point is that these countries are losing their legitimacy. They are losing their right to basically exist. In my brain, at least, if a country attacks another, how can you justify the fact that you won't do that again to another country? So, the more conflict a country generates, the more conflict it will continue to dissipate around it. So, Israel doing genocide in Gaza means other countries will look at that and say, oh, they weren't penalized. Maybe we can use that rhetoric to do the same thing too. So, you see where I'm going with this. Because the same way they see Hamas as terrorists is the same way Palestinians can see Israelis as terrorists as well on their case. It's the same thing. Same thing in Russia. The same way that Putin said that we're going to beat neo-fascists in Ukraine and then invade them and then proceeded to bomb cities and everything like that. Also to the point of almost reaching nuclear reactors. This is the same way the Ukrainian civilians look at the Russians as terrorists. Bro, countries are not like they used to be before. We don't expand territory anymore with bombs. We do it at least on the surface. Try to do it democratically. Voting. Right? If you really had that many Russians in there, I'm not saying there weren't Russians on those sides, because obviously there were. But if you really had how many, whatever you said, organize referendum by the authorities in there and let them elect a Russian candidate. And if they want to separate, like Kosovo did, or like whatever else happened in Europe with countries, or like the in Romanian there is this discussion about the I don't know how you translate in English, but it's like this ținutul secuiesc, which is the... Let me see. Let me see if there's a translation for this. The Land of Legends. That sounds actually amazing. Well, anyway, so yeah, we have this in Romania as well, with the Hungarian minority wanting to like strip out, and because minorities, if you don't grant them the same rights as the others, and they feel like they are on their own and abandoned and whatever, and they elect, of course, politicians under the same state that go in the parliament and try to fight for the minorities, and you see that through the years nothing is happening, of course you're gonna say, well, if nothing is happening, then okay, why are we in this country still, and why are we suffering for so many years? You don't care about us. Of course, this is the same thing that's happening in Catalonia, and that's why they want to separate from Spain, because they don't give a shit. Like, they want to impose their narrative of Spanish learning languages and like eradicate their Catalonia, like their Catalonia, the heritage and the language and everything like that. They just want to be Spanish everywhere, which is wrong, bro. Like, if a region has history, just like the country that was formed by whatever ancient blah blah blah, that region exists for a reason. Why? Because of some monetary benefit, or some idea, political idea that you have in your brain, or GDP growth, or I don't know what access gives that to you. Why would you want to eradicate a culture off the face of the earth? Because of what? Money? Not legitimate. Bring me a legitimate region. I got pissed off. Let's continue to see the video, because I'm gonna sit here for 5 hours.
Of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Collective punishment is explicitly prohibited by Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Palestinians are protected persons under international law. The ICJ has also made a preliminary finding that Palestinians, quote, constitute a distinct national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, and hence a protected group within the meaning of the Genocide Convention. Armed conflict rules require distinguishing between civilians and combatants, with civilian objects presumed non-military unless proven otherwise. Indiscriminate attacks, such as the use of disproportionate weapons in populated areas, are prohibited. Israel uses 2,000-pound bombs in densely populated areas, by the way, but we'll get to that in a bit. Medical personnel, hospitals, and those transporting supplies must be respected and protected, with warnings required before attacking medical facilities. Intentional destruction of cultural, religious, educational, or historical buildings constitutes a war crime. Israel must not deprive civilians of survival essentials, destroy objects indispensable to civilian life, or impede humanitarian aid per customary international law and the law of belligerent occupation. If Israel cannot provide basic necessities, it must allow impartial humanitarian organizations to deliver relief rapidly and without obstruction. Under international humanitarian law, states must investigate and prosecute war crimes committed by their forces or on their territory. Israel must respect the right to life and ensure accountability for arbitrary killings by its agents.
So, they're doing genocide. They are not letting the UN get in with supplies. Civilians are dying. They killed more than 1,000 people. The Palestinian ministry said over 50,000. But they cannot count, bro. Like, humanely, they cannot count that many. They are just reporting what they can count. Imagine the uncountable. Like, people, they found a big lump of, like, under the ground. They found, like, I don't know, 1,000 bodies or something, just in a flash, buried by presumably by the Israeli army, and burnt, by the way, because they are trying to cover up whatever they're doing there. So whatever they're doing there.
Now that we know some of the many obligations of the Israeli state and any other state that finds itself in a similar situation, we need to cover what exactly genocide is under international law. Article 2 of the Genocide Convention defines genocide as specific acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. These acts include killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately creating conditions calculated to destroy the group, preventing births, and forcibly transferring children. So if one or more of these prohibited acts takes place and is committed with the intent to destroy the protected group, in whole or in part, then that fits the definition of genocide.
Kills member of the group. Ticked. Causing seriously body or mental harm to another. Beheading. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Literally limiting the access of UN and supplies and medical condition and medical like hospitals and everything like that. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Deliberately targeting children, deliberately targeting women, killing them, like sniping them effectively. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. They're just killing them, they're transferring them to the other side. I don't know where they are transferring them, but they are absolutely murdering them. So, yeah. Netanyahu, I hope you watch this and go to hell.
What distinguishes genocide from other crimes is the requirement of a specific intent known as dolo specialis. It's
hell is like this cool bar here in my place, and we go there to gather and talk about stuff. So that's just a disclaimer.
Important to note that total annihilation is not a requirement. The intent to destroy even a substantial part of the group, which is not measured by any sort of numeric threshold, will do. As the ICJ puts it, the part targeted must be significant enough to have an impact on the group as a whole. Palestinians in Gaza are part of a protected group and serve as a substantial portion of Palestinians. This intent component makes genocide uniquely difficult to prove and creates a hierarchy of crimes where genocide carries greater societal weight despite crimes like extermination often being equally severe in practice and being punishable by similar sentencing. This emphasis on genocide, in my opinion, is well-intentioned, but historically it has led to inconsistent applications as seen in Yugoslavia. For example, the Srebrenica massacre is rightly considered as a genocide, but similar massacres in other enclaves and parts of Bosnia are not. This inconsistency allows states like Israel to evade accountability for actions prohibited by the Genocide Convention, but are difficult to prove as genocide under the strict intent requirement. As a result, Israel, or any other analogous state, can then distance itself from the moral culpability it deserves and leverage the lack of genocide charges to deflect from its clear human rights abuses and war crimes. This imbalance suggests to me that the heightened focus on genocide as the crime of crimes, combined with its notoriously inconsistent legal application, might actually hinder the pursuit of justice in cases where intent is hard to prove, leading to states pointing at the lack of genocide charges and deflecting a degree of accountability due to this hierarchy of crimes. Nonetheless, Amnesty International, a massive human rights organization, has not only accused Israel of genocide, but laid out a concise, well-written, and thoroughly researched case as to why they did so, and I agree with them. Let's take a look at that definition again. The third prohibited act, the one about deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, has had some light shined on it by international jurisprudence, which provides these examples to highlight what can be considered a breach of this rule. Subjecting the group to a sustenance diet, reducing essential medical services below a minimum requirement, systematically expelling members of the group from their homes, generally creating circumstances that would lead to a slow death, such as lack of proper food, water, shelter, clothing, or sanitation, and subjecting members of the group to excessive work or physical exertion. Again, since intent is hard to prove, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia has ruled that the objective probability of these conditions leading to the physical destruction of the group should be taken into consideration. The factors to be considered according to the ICTY are the actual nature of the conditions of life, the length of time that members of the group were subjected to them, and the characteristics of the group, such as its vulnerability, so children, sick people, and so forth. So even if you can't prove intent to destroy a group by bringing about these conditions, if the conditions imposed show an objective probability of leading to the physical destruction of the group, that will do. Furthermore, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia have established that specific intent, dolo specialis, for genocide can be inferred from circumstantial evidence instead of requiring explicit proof. The following factors can be used to infer intent: the broader context of the acts, systematic targeting of the same group, scale and repetition of atrocities, the number of and indiscriminate targeting of victims, attempts to conceal crimes, use of derogatory and dehumanizing language, and political doctrines underlying the acts. Again, I'm sorry if this is boring you, but I promise it's really important and we will get to the meat of this report soon. Deliberate destruction of cultural or religious property in the absence of a legitimate military objective can also serve as evidence of intent to destroy a group, notably when combined with physical or biological destruction. The ICTY has emphasized looking at evidence holistically, so in the context of the broader conflict, rather than isolating individual acts. The context and history of the Palestinian plight, specifically the plight of Palestinians in Gaza, is imperative to keep in mind when inferring intent. Genocidal intent can still coexist with military aims. The fact that a military conflict or a war is taking place in a region does not preclude actors from holding multiple intentions. The ICJ concluded that for specific intent to be inferred, the intent to destroy a group in whole or in part must be the only reasonable conclusion drawn from the evidence. With all of that said, let's finally get into Israel's actions, in some cases lack thereof, and dehumanizing language used against Palestinians. In this report, Amnesty International focused on 15 of the many Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and investigated them thoroughly. The findings are horrific. In total, there were 334 killed, including 141 children, and no evidence of military objectives in any of these attacks. According to Amnesty, the Israeli military's responses regarding the attacks on the St. Porphyrius Church compound and the street market in Al-Maghazi were vague, with no substantiated claims of legitimate military targets or fighters in the vicinity. Amnesty reports that as of September 30th, 2024, no criminal investigation has been initiated by the Office of the Military Advocate General into these cases. All 15 of these airstrikes were attacks on civilian objects. In 14 of these attacks, the people in the locations hit received no prior warning. In the other instance, the attack on the Al-Nakla family home in Nusayrat refugee camp on October 8th, 2023, the people did receive a warning, but it was not an effective one. In that case, the family fled their home after their neighbor received a warning that his home would be bombed. Since 5 hours passed and no bombing took place, the family thought it was a misunderstanding and believed it would be safe to return to collect some of their necessities. Once they returned to collect their belongings, Israeli forces bombed their home, killing 4 people and injuring 20 others. Again, Amnesty International found no evidence in any of these cases that there was any legitimate military objectives in or near the locations bombed. Keep in mind, Israel is obligated to do whatever it can to minimize the loss of innocent civilian life. You tell me if what I'm about to tell you sounds like the actions of a deeply concerned and benevolent Israeli military. Not only did they strike these 15 locations with no effective warnings, they used wide-range explosives in densely populated civilian areas. In some cases, large US-manufactured JDAM explosives were used. And in some instances, Israeli forces would conduct these airstrikes in the middle of the night while people were sleeping. Amnesty International found that 12 of the 15 attacks it investigated were strikes on homes and residential buildings, 5 of which were bombed between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. One example was that of the Harb family, whose home was hit just before dawn on December 12, 2023, while they were all sleeping. 25 members of the family, all civilians, were killed. Israel carried out these attacks, all lacking any legitimate military objective, and a good amount of them while people were asleep. This does not indicate that Israeli forces are all too concerned with mitigating the loss of innocent life, nor are they concerned with bringing those responsible for these killings to justice, even though they are obligated to do so under international humanitarian law. You should see my notes as I was going through this PDF. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. Amnesty International reached out to the Israeli Ministry of Defense for an explanation, but it didn't receive a response. I don't want to share all the details about all the civilians killed because it's gruesome and horrible and something I recommend you read for yourself. However, I will share one of the stories from this report. At about 11:20 p.m. on April 20th, 2024, the Abdalal family house in Rafah, the area in which Gazans were told would be a safe space to seek refuge, was struck by Israeli forces, killing 16 children and 4 women, all members of the same family. Rafah was Gaza's most densely populated governorate by far, and it wasn't uncommon for buildings in the area to be packed with dozens of people. The victims in this specific attack were asleep when the house was hit. 3 generations of Palestinians were killed in that strike. Hussein Abdalal, who lost his mother, wives, and children in that attack, told Amnesty International that all he had left of them were shreds and pieces of clothing, and he would find them without heads. In a just world, this story would spark all the outrage that the fake beheaded babies story did, but it's happening to Palestinians, so the mainstream media doesn't seem all too eager to report on it. Between October 7th of 2023 and October 7th of 2024, The Gaza-based Ministry of Health recorded 42,000 Palestinian fatalities in Gaza. This does not include those still buried beneath the rubble or those missing. Just under 60% of these confirmed fatalities were children, women, and the elderly. The remaining 40% were men under 60 with no independent organizations able to establish how many were combatants and how many were civilians. By October 7th, 2024, 97,500 Gazans had been injured, and by July 2024, at least 22,500 Gazans had been left with life-changing injuries. To read directly from the Amnesty report, while these 15 cases represent only a small fraction of the total number of aerial attacks on Gaza by Israel following October 7th, 2023, other human rights organizations have concluded, as regards other airstrikes, that Israel carried out direct attacks on civilians and civilian objects or indiscriminate attacks that resulted in the death of civilians. The cases documented by Amnesty International and other organizations demonstrate a pattern of repeated direct and indiscriminate attacks by the Israeli military in Gaza over the 9-month period under review. Such attacks were conducted in ways that were designed to cause a very high number of fatalities among the civilian population, as evidenced through Israel's use of explosive weapons with wide area effects, the timing and location of attacks, and the absence of effective warnings in some cases, or of any warnings at all in others. Viewed in isolation, some of the attacks analyzed and the resultant high civilian death toll may be attributed to recklessness or negligence on the part of the Israeli military. However, viewed together and cumulatively, over the course of 9 months, when committed by one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the world, Israel's repetition of such deadly attacks, many on homes and other buildings in densely populated civilian neighborhoods, indicates intentional and deliberate direct attacks on civilians, or equally intentional and deliberately indiscriminate attacks. These acts were specifically committed against Palestinians in Gaza, who are a substantial part of a protected group under the Genocide Convention. Crucial to inferring intent, we need to look at Israel's actions when it comes to inflicting conditions intended to bring about the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. Critical and life-sustaining infrastructure and other objects indispensable to the survival of the Palestinian population in Gaza were destroyed by Israel during the 9-month period reviewed by Amnesty International. This included essential parts of the food production system. Huge tracts of land dedicated to cultivating potatoes, wheat, and strawberries were destroyed. The Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, reported that more than a quarter of the greenhouses in Gaza and hundreds of agricultural sites had been damaged. UNICEF found that about 63% of the permanent crop fields in Gaza showed a decline in health and density, which was attributed to bombing and shelling by the FAO. Newly cleared land along Gaza's eastern border, which happened to be where Gaza's most fertile land was located, was destroyed by the Israeli military, who used bulldozers and manually placed landmines in the attempt to expand a buffer zone. Human Rights Watch reported on Israeli forces razing agricultural land while simultaneously deliberately blocking the delivery of food, water, and fuel to the people in Gaza and impeding humanitarian assistance. They argue that by depriving the population of Gaza of objects indispensable to their survival, agricultural capabilities, and pairing that with the obstruction of food, water, and aid, Israel was using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. Aside from this, Gaza's ability to produce food once hostilities cease has been significantly damaged. A staff member of the Union of Agricultural Work Committees said that Israel stole the ability to produce food from Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of residential buildings were destroyed as well in the process of decimating critical infrastructure. About 62% of homes in Gaza were damaged or destroyed by January 2020.
I'm trying to share this report on my Facebook, because I know that there is a complete out of the bubble, I don't know, user base that follows me and we follow each other that I don't think they've seen this, so I'm just gonna post it.
24. The damage and destruction is estimated to have affected over 1 million people. Thousands of homes and structures were damaged or destroyed during Israel's attempt to expand the buffer zone on Gaza's eastern perimeter. As of May 2024, more than 90% of the buildings within this area, including schools, homes, and places of worship, were destroyed or damaged. After further investigation into the decimation in areas within this buffer zone, it was found that extensive damage and destruction of property and agricultural land was carried out after Israeli forces had acquired operational control of these areas, meaning the decimation was not a result of hostilities between Israeli forces and Hamas. This was a deliberate attempt to destroy critical infrastructure without legitimate military necessity. Let's move on to water, sanitation, and energy infrastructure. Around 84% of health facility buildings and 57% of water infrastructure in Gaza were either destroyed or damaged. Multiple images uploaded by the Gaza City municipality revealed severe damage to water carriers, generators, pumps, drainage, and sewage lines. This, paired with the destruction of all the heavy machinery at the Al-Fukari landfill, the final disposal site for solid waste from the governorate south of Wadi Gaza, led to a severe waste management crisis. With sewage and wastewater systems inoperable, raw sewage frequently flooded Gaza's streets, contributing to the spread of illness and disease. Over 60% of the electricity distribution network was also targeted. Reputable organizations investigating the damage to Gaza's critical infrastructure concluded that much of it was caused by the Israeli military, which was fully aware of the destruction to vital resources necessary for the survival of Gaza's civilian population. Under international humanitarian law, Israel is required to facilitate rapid aid to mitigate this damage and ensure the population's quality of life meets specific standards. Instead, Israel obstructed and delayed the delivery of humanitarian aid and essential supplies into Gaza. Israel justified its fuel restrictions on safety grounds, but failed to explain why other energy sources, such as electricity, couldn't be supplied. While Israel claimed that 9 out of 10 electricity lines into Gaza had been damaged, they never clarified why those lines weren't repaired. In July 2024, under immense international pressure, Israel agreed to allow the direct supply of electricity to a UN-managed water desalination plant, but by September 30th, 2024, this step had not been taken, even after the feeder lines were repaired. This shows that Israel was in fact capable of agreeing to actions intended to mitigate harm to civilians, but just chose not to for months. In addition to everything I've already mentioned, Israel obstructed the import of alternative energy sources like solar panels into Gaza. Now let's look at hospitals. Doctors in the region reported that hospitals' abilities to perform their duties was severely obstructed due to a lack of supplies, constant evacuation orders that forced closures, and the abandonment of what little resources they had, the killings and disappearances of medical staff, and raids or attacks that caused significant damage to facilities. Some hospitals, such as Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, were raided by Israeli forces at least twice. Human Rights Watch documented multiple Israeli attacks that caused extensive damage to hospitals. CNN reported that by December 2023, 20 out of 22 hospitals in northern Gaza had been destroyed or damaged, with craters near 11 of these hospitals indicating the use of 2,000-pound bombs. Why use 2,000-pound bombs near hospitals filled with civilians? I don't know. Repeated and unorganized displacements were also used by Israeli authorities in a way that suggests they were attempting to bring about conditions intended to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. About 90% of Gaza's population was displaced internally, with many people forced to move more than once, some up to 10 times. Israeli authorities claimed these evacuation orders were meant to protect civilians from military activity, saying more evacuations were necessary because Hamas and other groups had moved with the civilian population. But if these orders were actually about protecting Palestinians, shoving them into overcrowded, unsanitary campsites, blocking humanitarian aid, and then forcing them to move again isn't very protective. Some people were even stuck sleeping next to solid waste dumps or sewage pipelines. Under international law, Israel, as the occupying power, is supposed to make sure people have proper accommodations, clean water, decent food, and basic health and sanitation. They're also supposed to make sure civilians can safely return to their homes once the fighting ends, as per Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention. On top of that, international human rights law says they need to provide food, medicine, and housing, or if they can't for some reason, they must allow for humanitarian organizations to administer that aid in a rapid and unimpeded fashion, meaning no arbitrary stops or lengthy bureaucratic processes that slow down the distribution of aid. Israel did not abide by this, but we'll get into the specifics in a bit. Israel could have done literally anything to protect civilians, let them go back to their homes in northern Gaza, let them temporarily relocate to the West Bank, or even let them into Israel. About 70% of Gaza's population are refugees or descendants of refugees who were kicked out during the Nakba, and international law says they have the right to return to those lands. Any of these options would have been better than trapping people in overcrowded, unhygienic camps, and subjecting them to illness and disease. To make things worse, the Israeli military didn't publish an official list of the evacuation orders. Instead, these orders were delivered in confusing, contradictory, and inefficient ways that led to Palestinians being unable to rely on just one source. The means of delivery included social media posts by Kogat, a unit in the Israeli Ministry of Defense, airdropped leaflets, and a digital map that could be accessed by scanning a QR code. Seems like a bad way to deliver life-preserving orders given the lack of access to electricity. Sometimes, Kogat failed to post evacuation orders on its Facebook page, even though the Israeli military's Arabic media spokesperson had issued them, leaving portions of Gaza's population unaware of the orders. Kogat also issued evacuations through mocking imagery and messages. One post shows a fake weather report warning Palestinians that the weather in their region would be, quote, heavy rains of missiles and shells, while contrasting other parts of Gaza, the parts where people were ordered to flee to, as being clear, comfortable, and sunny. Take note at these laughing reactions on Facebook, contrasted with the desperate pleas in the comments. Israel dropped leaflets saying anyone who stays in North Gaza would be considered an accomplice to terrorism and lose their protected status, even though there is no basis for a threat of that kind under international law. Yet, on social media, after public outcry, the official Israeli X account claimed it had no intention of considering those who have yet to evacuate as members of a terrorist group. This is an important point because, as we will see later, the conflation of terrorists and Gazan civilians is constantly made by Israeli authorities, forces, and settlers. This is absolutely unacceptable and illegal. Israeli forces made innocent Palestinians leave their homes through Israeli-designated humanitarian corridors and walk for kilometers waving white flags without basic necessities. One 30-year-old woman reported that, on her third displacement, she was forced to flee from Gaza City to Khan Yunis in a wheelchair pushed by her husband. Her earlier displacement took place after Israeli forces bombed her house, killing 5 members of her family, which led her to seek refuge at a school in a refugee camp. That camp was also bombed by Israeli forces, resulting in the amputation of her right leg and putting her in that wheelchair. The severity and pace at which this damage occurred has not been seen in any other conflict in the 21st century. According to a joint interim report by the World Bank, UN, and EU, the levels of destruction in Gaza are unprecedented. I'm going to repeat myself here because this is crucial to understand. As the occupying power, Israel is obligated not only to ensure that the population of Gaza has adequate access to essential supplies like food, shelter, medicine, and sanitary environments, but it is also obligated to facilitate rapid and unimpeded passage of impartial humanitarian relief for civilians in need, as is stated under customary international humanitarian law. Now let's see if Israel did its part to comply. Between October 2023 and July 2024, Israeli authorities adopted policies and actions that resulted in the obstruction and denial of essential services and supplies to Gazan Palestinians. Israel implemented a total siege policy, maintained an unlawful blockade, refused to open access points to Gaza for sufficient aid to enter and be distributed, cut off access to electricity and fuel, and failed to facilitate adequate...
I don't know, this is like, every time I listen to this, like the goddamn, their actions, that to me it's incomprehensible that someone is still able to do this in 2024 without repercussions. I'm like speechless, bro.
Access for humanitarian organizations to distribute life-saving aid, food, water, and medicine within Gaza. The impact of Israel's conduct was made clear to Israeli authorities by humanitarian officials who warned them about the destruction their actions caused and exacerbated. According to Amnesty International, at no point between October 2023 and July 2024 did Israeli authorities ease restrictions to adequately allow humanitarian organizations to provide Palestinians in Gaza with the appropriate volume and array of aid and life-saving supplies. In fact, Israeli officials actively impeded humanitarian organizations' ability to do their job by implementing arbitrary and bureaucratic barriers, including failing to open access points to Gaza and imposing lengthy, arbitrary, and unprecedented processes for organizations to import goods. By cutting off electricity and tightly controlling access to fuel, they further hindered humanitarian efforts. This conduct blatantly disregards their obligations under international law to facilitate rapid aid and instead aligns with Israeli officials' promises to create, quote, hell for those in Gaza. The UN humanitarian coordinator for the OPT, Lynn Hastings, told UN News on October 15, 2023, that humanitarian organizations were ready and willing to bring aid for Palestinians in Gaza, but they were still waiting for Israeli approval. Hastings stated that Israel was connecting humanitarian assistance into Gaza with the release of hostages, which, if true, sounds a lot like collective punishment and is illegal. Israeli officials were fully aware of the humanitarian crisis and only opened 2 crossing points in southern Gaza, the Rafah crossing and, after immense international pressure, the Kerem Shalom crossing into Israel. Even after opening the Kerem Shalom crossing, Israel continued to impede access into Gaza via both this and the Rafah crossing. In January 2024, the ICJ ordered Israel to take effective measures to facilitate and enable humanitarian aid into Gaza immediately. Israel ignored this order. Amnesty International found that as late as a month after the ICJ order, Israel still disobeyed and failed to take even the bare minimum steps to comply. Within 3 weeks of the ICJ order, the number of trucks entering Gaza actually decreased by about a third. In April 2024, following mounting international pressure due to the killing of innocent humanitarians.
So let me get this straight. They were told, hey, yo, if you keep blocking the access you're like in Gaza, you're gonna suffer consequences. Oh, okay, sorry, we're not gonna do that. And they're limiting them more. What the? If that is not killer abuse / whatever else, gaslighter mentality of a fucking colonizer, then I don't know what is.
Working for World Central Kitchen on April 1st, Israel made commitments to better facilitate aid, improve coordination between the IDF and humanitarians, and temporarily open the Erez crossing in northern Gaza. This proves Israel could have taken these actions all along but chose not to, resulting in unnecessary suffering and death. Aid groups had been pleading for these measures for months. Only after the killing of World Central Kitchen workers did then Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant tell journalists that Israel would, quote, flood Gaza with aid. Gisha, an Israeli nonprofit concerned with protecting the freedom and movement of Palestinians, pointed out, the fact that these measures were not implemented months ago is inexplicable and inexcusable. Every day that passes while plans are touted but not put into practice leads to more unnecessary death and indescribable suffering for Palestinians in Gaza. Without a full, long-lasting ceasefire and lacking effective coordination with aid agencies on the ground, these steps, inasmuch as they are implemented, will remain insufficient. Despite Gallant's promises, humanitarian organizations reported that the anticipated flood of aid never materialized. They observed no significant improvement from Israeli authorities in addressing the dire challenges of providing life-saving aid. The situation worsened when Israel began its ground invasion into Rafah, the southern Gaza governorate where Palestinians had been told to flee to. Rafah, a crucial crossing point for aid, was taken over by Israeli forces, who destroyed parts of it, further exacerbating the crisis. On May 24, 2024, the ICJ stepped in with a third order, demanding that Israel immediately stop its military offensive in Rafah and avoid any actions that could lead to the physical destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. They also insisted that Israel keep the Rafah crossing open for essential aid and services. Just 4 days later, 20 aid organizations confirmed that the crossings were still, quote, effectively shut to meaningful humanitarian assistance, and that the attacks on Rafah were actually increasing. To quote directly from the Amnesty International report, the scale of the attacks, the number of civilian victims spread across ages and genders and within multi-generational families, the repetition of destructive acts, and the perpetration of other culpable acts systemically targeted at the same group are all factors that indicate genocidal intent when considered holistically with others. Such conditions of life were the combined results of a number of deliberate policies, actions, and omissions by Israel. These included Israel's role in and knowledge of the large-scale damage to and destruction of critical infrastructure and other objects indispensable to the survival of the civilian population following 7 October 2023, combined with Israel's mass and repeated forced displacement of the vast majority of Gaza's population under unsafe and unsanitary conditions, and Israel's denial and obstruction of the delivery of essential services and life-saving supplies into and within Gaza. The combination of these deliberate policies, actions, and omissions by Israel led to entirely foreseeable consequences, including widespread and severe hunger, disease, and death. The 17-year-old unlawful blockade of Gaza has laid the groundwork for Israel to rapidly create these conditions. It is significant that Israel maintained its approach despite mounting evidence of its impact, warnings and calls by international bodies, and numerous legally binding orders by the ICJ. To further illustrate not only intent, but also the brazen disrespect and desire to destroy Palestinian infrastructure and history, videos have been collected showing Israeli soldiers celebrating or mocking the destruction or burning religious texts inside damaged mosques. Universities, mosques, and other culturally significant buildings have been decimated by Israeli forces. The ICJ has established that when these acts are carried out deliberately, they can be considered evidence of intent to destroy a group. The Amnesty report documents cases of destroyed cultural and religious sites, and in many instances, Israeli forces were in control of them at the time of destruction, suggesting that there was no military imperative and that the destruction was carried out deliberately and without justification. Images of Israeli soldiers mocking and posing next to burning books inside of Gazan libraries has also surfaced, further lending credence to the idea that they aren't so much attacking Hamas in these instances, they're erasing the cultural edifices of a people they despise. The report is filled with much more incriminating evidence, but for the sake of brevity, let's move on to the dehumanizing, genocidal language used against Palestinians by Israeli authorities, soldiers, and settlers, which, when viewed in combination with their actions, can help us to infer intent. It's important to note that Israel's offensive on Gaza took place within the context of a long and, according to the ICJ, unlawful military occupation of Palestinian territory. This long history of malpractice and atrocities committed by Israel against the Palestinians comes with it a long history of dehumanization and bigotry. Israeli forces can be quoted referring to their offensive on Palestinians in Gaza as a fight between good and evil, often using language intended to strip humanity from Palestinians. For those who aren't sentimental when it comes to words, it's imperative to understand that degrading, racist, and dehumanizing language has historically been used to radicalize populations and convince them to go along with genocides, ethnic cleansings, and other horrors of the kind. It's not something to take lightly. In 2016, long before the October 7th attacks, Netanyahu can be quoted referring to Palestinians and Arabs in neighboring countries as predators or, according to some translations, wild beasts. He spoke about building a fence around Israel to protect his country from the predators. Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was convicted of supporting a terrorist organization and inciting anti-Palestinian racism in 2008,
Dar nu, ăștia înainte de 7 octombrie, nu cred. Nu, ăștia nu, ce, că ăștia există din... Dar stai puțin, că ăștia de sute de ani fac ca... Dar sunt Man. Wake up.
Said that his and his family's right to walk around the occupied West Bank is more important than the right of movement of Arabs. Then Minister of Defense and now wanted war criminal Yoav Gallant referred to Palestinians as human animals, and the H3H3 podcast referred to Yoav Gallant as a good guy. Major General Ghassan Alyan, head of Kogat, referred to Palestinians as human beasts. Netanyahu has referred to Palestinians in Gaza as people from an uncivilized world, wicked city, and jungle. He has framed the conflict as a struggle between the children of darkness, referring to Palestinians in Gaza, and the children of light, apparently referring to Israelis. In December 2023, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem said that Palestinian men were not humans and not even human animals. He went on to say that they are subhumans and should be treated as such. He continued by saying, "Erase the memory of Amalek, we will not forget." Amalek being a reference to the biblical story where Israelis massacred the Amalekites. Totally not a super genocidal thing to say. Netanyahu loves that one too. Israel also linked humanitarian aid with the release of the hostages, further implying that innocent Palestinian civilians suffering were somehow responsible for the hostage situation and didn't deserve aid until the hostages were released. Furthermore, the conflation of Palestinians and Hamas is used as a tool by Israeli authorities and settlers frequently. The idea that there are no innocents in Gaza is a sentiment repeated often, despite the fact that collective punishment is illegal. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said, "First of all, we have to understand that there's a state. There's a state, in a way, that has built a machine of evil right at our doorstep. It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It's not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat, murdering their family members who were in Fatah." This sentiment was echoed by others in the region, specifically settlers in the occupied West Bank, where graffiti reading, "There are no uninvolved" can be seen painted onto watchtowers. This language is directly reminiscent of Herzog's statement. Ben-Gvir also conflated innocence with Hamas when he said, "To be clear, when they say that Hamas needs to be eliminated, it also means those who sing, those who support, and those who distribute sweets. All of these are terrorists, and they should be eliminated." I don't know if it gets any clearer than that. Oh, it does. Finance Minister Smotrich referred to Gazans as, quote, 2 million Nazis who want to slaughter Jews. Last time I checked, there are up to Gazans.
Nah. Nah. I think I just cooked my brain, bro. I think nah. Nah. Bro. What the hmm. 2 million Nazis. Oh, look how that turned around, Mr. Finance Minister Smotrich. Totally not a name that I will probably remember for the rest of my life as being a supporter, unironically, of genocide.
As, quote, 2 million Nazis who want to slaughter Jews. Last time I checked, there are about 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, and not even close to all of them are in Hamas. Hardly any of them are, actually, so this is a clear conflation on his part. An Israeli soldier posted on social media a video of himself pointing at some goats and saying, "These are the only uninvolved in Gaza." In one video posted to X, Israeli singer Lior Narkis is seen performing a racist song to a cheering crowd of soldiers saying, "Gaza, you black woman, you piece of trash, you whore." I don't know why black women always gotta catch a stray like that, but
Bro.
you get the point. This guy's an asshole. It's clear that the degrading and dehumanizing ideas promoted by Israeli authorities have disseminated throughout the entire Israeli apparatus, from the politicians to the soldiers to the settlers. It's clear as day that they routinely conflate innocent Palestinians with terrorists and act accordingly. The celebration of the destruction in Gaza is common for IDF soldiers who laugh at and mock the decimation of Palestinian property through controlled demolitions, arson, and vandalism. Amnesty International collected 41 videos, audio recordings, and images showing Israeli soldiers doing just that. In some videos, IDF soldiers can be seen smoking cigarettes or pipes and casually watching and celebrating the demolition of buildings behind them. Are these really the actions of the most moral army in the world? The combination of Israel's conduct in Gaza and the dehumanizing, degrading, and racist language that accompanied it, when viewed in the context of apartheid, an unlawful blockade, and military occupation, serves as damning evidence. Amnesty International argues that it is sufficient evidence of Israel's intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. The constant disobedience in the face of ICJ orders and pleas from the international community, the attempts to impede humanitarian organizations in their effort to administer sufficient aid and necessities, the constant displacement while ignoring their obligations under international law to provide adequate living conditions and supplies, ignoring humanitarian organizations' requests for months, only to finally succumb to them after killing innocent world kitchen workers, but still failing to follow through. The decimation of cultural and religious sites in Gaza while celebrating and posing for pictures. The constant dehumanization through derogatory language and name-calling, even from those who hold the highest positions in the land. The withholding of fuel while claiming that they would send electricity to UN-managed water desalination plants, but then not actually doing it. Using 2,000-pound bombs in densely populated areas, airstriking residential buildings with no apparent military imperative, and killing generations of sleeping Palestinians in one blast. I struggle to see any other reasonable explanation for this behavior other than genocidal intent. To end this video with one more quote from the report, in assessing genocidal intent, Amnesty International analyzed such violations of international law. It reviewed them together and cumulatively, taking into account their recurrence and their simultaneous occurrence time and time again, compounding each other's harmful impact. Furthermore, the organization considered the scale and severity of the casualties and destruction repeated over time, in spite of continuous warnings by the UN and Israel's own allies, as well as the multiple binding orders of the ICJ. Viewed individually, the acts analyzed in this report constitute serious violations of international humanitarian law and/or gross violations of human rights. Viewed holistically, a more disturbing picture emerges. The commission of prohibited acts under the Genocide Convention, including killing and causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a protected group, and deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. In conclusion, we need to stop being afraid to call this what it is. We have no problem calling out adversarial countries for the atrocities and war crimes they commit. We should continue to do so and condemn human rights abuses and authoritarianism in all their forms wherever they pop up. But that includes when they pop up in Western and Western allied countries.
This video is sponsored.
Yes. 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 Yes.
A few weeks.
Yes. Absolutely yes. Yes. And yes again. If you haven't checked out his channel, go check it out. Bro does. Sorry. There we go. Bro does more than a lot of my media does to educate people on stuff. This is why YouTube is fantastic, by the way. This is why such websites that allow you to upload videos and for everybody to see it, moderated or not, making money or not, because you get to see this, bro. You get to see these other perspectives other than what the media shows you of investment, of, I don't know, whatever company entrepreneurial thing they promote in whatever. They show this other side of the coin that you need to take care of, because if everything was gonna be, or at least feel good in this world, it would have been already. How much time did capitalism have? It's like 40 years almost here in goddamn Romania. Almost 40 years. And do people feel... No. The people feel more distant from the rich than they were before. And you can see that in other countries as well. You can see the rich going further and upper and upper and upper. And you can see the poor going... The rich are going like that, out, skyrocket, and the poor, like year by year, and the poor are going like this. Hold up. Oh, there's another crisis in. Oh my god, we're reaching the level. And then they're there. And the poor is here. The middle class is somewhere here, because that's not even middle anymore. What the hell is going on? So that's why I'm recommending this channel. That's why I'm recommending Overzealots. That's why I'm recommending him. He's so good. He does music as well, bro. I'm glazing over this channel because there are a lot of things that I enjoy watching and that I love. And he hasn't, like, he started recently. So, like 6 months ago, at least from what I can see here. So, yeah, definitely on point with my personal values and what I stand for. And definitely recommend you guys watching him and seeing what he's about, because it, in my opinion, it's worth it, bro. Like, the research he does, the sources he provides, like, it's not manipulation, it's not something like that, it's just real, bro. Like, it's real, and you can feel it too. And this is not even populism, because it's based on sources and facts. So if you wanna consider that manipulation, it is not, because the sources are there and everything is there. Like, he takes everything seriously, and I love it. So yeah, check it out. He has videos on this conflict with Palestine, has videos on why socialism has never been tried actually in any country, but still the right wing decides to accuse it for existing in the first place, or it doesn't even exist. This video here, it's like defining why social democracy in Sweden or in other countries are actually not that good as they may seem to be, with valid reasoning and points. Like, these are actual things that make you realize, okay, the world is not how we thought it was. exposing creators such as Asmongold for spreading literally hate and a dehumanizing rhetoric through other people, even though they apologized afterwards. Bro, like, it's actually crazy. So go ahead, do that. This video here when socialism actually worked, before obviously the Americans coming in. So lads, do me a favor, watch him, subscribe to him, and make sure you follow him because he does a good job. Now before I glaze more, let me actually go ahead and take a look to see. Yeah, this is my feed actually, what I've been playing lately. Where is the... I wanted to watch something. In this
up front. Honestly, it's
okay, I had this learning playlist done. I've had one here, and oh, yeah. Next part is gonna be more Romanian because I wanna. Because I just wanna. TimmyTheGiant explică în video ăsta despre cum a evitat el sau cum a scăpat din această cum să o numesc, acest topogan care efectiv te duce spre narativa de alt-right. Alt-right înseamnă de dreapta de Lulu, nu știu cum să o traduc efectiv. Nu știu dacă are vreo traducere în română. Alt-right meaning a right-wing ideological movement characterized by a rejection of mainstream politics and by the use of online media to disseminate provocative content. Alt-dreapta, ok. Alternative right, da. E o mișcare naționalistă de dreapta care e o alternativă la dreapta, de fapt. E altă dreapta decât aia tradițională pe care o știm noi, cu liberalism și whatever. Asta e dreapta modernă, de fascistă, far right, you will see. Hai să vedem.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Yes, my brothers, my brodies, my woadies. I'm going to do another one of these little talk to cams. You might have noticed, you know, through some of my videos, I officially joined the woke brigade. It's unfortunate. I didn't really want to, but I'm going to talk how we got here. My political arc has been pretty insane. At one point, I was in a Nico Malama video supporting Trump. That's me. I'll admit it. Blurry boy.
Trump supporters UK. I'm here. Look at my hat. I love Donald Trump.
So today we're going to talk about how I managed to escape the alt-right pipeline.
Up yours, woke moralists. How big is Luton?
It's 200,000 population.
And how many mosques?
45.
There will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. It's a violent and cursed book.
Attacks on mosques. Other minority communities singled out.
Atacurile cur.
Racist rhetoric.
When I was a young gangster, a YG, I was a little bruh, right? A little bruh. I'm about 13 years old, and we're invited into school. It was mandatory, we weren't invited, and we had to do a speech. So, you know, my mate goes up and he does the history of Chelsea Football Club. A girl goes up and she does about horse riding. I go up with my little thumb drive, plug it in, 9/11. So I basically proceed to radicalize a classroom of young impressionable 13-year-olds as to why the American government did 9/11.
Who do you believe was behind 9/11?
Criminal elements of the military-industrial complex, the same ones that staged Gulf of Tonkin, the same ones that staged Operation, the mass shootings of Operation Gladio.
Right.
Ooh.
I was in this kind of like early conspiracy theory bubble, but what I want to say is it was interesting, right? Because at that time, being a conspiracy theorist wasn't left and right. It was just anti-establishment. And so, whilst I was listening to Alex Jones...
Exact, asta spune și el. Spune că... L-am oprit într-o postură foarte interesantă. Când ne uitam înainte, știu că și în România aveam chestia asta, îi aveam pe ăștia și încă îi avem în mare parte, dar acum parcă nu mai... Parcă nu mai au retorica asta, parcă... Nu mai par atât de demenți. Nu știu, adică nu neapărat demenți, dar aveam pe străinul care făcea din alea de vor să ne controleze mintea cu nu știu ce electromagnet. Ok, alea au fost disproved și dovedite ca fiind false de către oamenii de știință de la noi, pentru că, na, și a trebuit să se coboare la mintea cocoșului ca să explice de ce, în fine. Avem și noi conspiraționiștii noștri și mi-aduc aminte că pe vremea COVID erau destul de mulți. Era Gheorghe Piperea, încă e, dar acum nu mai e pe COVID, e pe altceva, că s-a schimbat tema, na, bineînțeles. Mai e Capsali, unul, mai e Ionașcu, mai sunt, efectiv, na, era unul Hitter pe atunci, nu mi-aduc aminte, dar efectiv era o bulă din asta de oameni care părea că au aceeași narrativă, aceeași retorică, aceeași chestie. Cu unii se duceau la conspirații la modul de ne pun masca la gură ca să ne controleze și trebuie să omorâm guvern. Atât de departe se duceau, dar asta nu mai contează. Acum neapărat, pe cât contează faptul că ei nu mai sunt acum vizibili aproape deloc pe rețelele de socializare. Pentru că unii din ei s-au băgat în politică, vezi Gheorghe Piperea, alții au rămas în media și și-au făcut propriul lor business sau chestii, whatever Cezar Ionașcu does. Ei, și când ești un copil, asta vreau să zic aici și Jimmy, scuze, asta vreau să zic și Jimmy aici, că atunci când ești copil și vezi chestii din astea sau, na, ai tu, nu fantezii, dar mă rog, ai tu chestiile astea tale cu deja conspirațiile nu intră alea cu extraterestri, sunt deja light level, alea în care crezi cu privire la politică că cine nea, nu știu ce, în America, că guvernul a organizat 9/11 și chestii de genul, which to this day you would see that, având în vedere că na, așa s-ar călca singur pe picior doar ca să justifice o atacul asupra unei țări. În fine, gen îi văd în stare să facă chestia asta. Nu știu dacă la nivelul ăla, dar mă rog, așa, în fine. Nu intrăm în detalii acum cu chestia aia, dar ai vedea oamenii ăștia și oamenii ăștia cred, asta spune și Jimmy, oamenii ăștia cred în chestiile astea pentru că sunt împotriva establishmentului politic. Deci așa pornește. Când establishmentul la noi în România fiind PSD, PNL, UDMR, pentru că sunt acolo, gen, împreună, se țin de mână de atât de zeci de ani, de aia sunt establishment. Ei sunt ăia cu care am crescut și care sunt baza politicii de la noi din țară și politicile pe care le fac ei, sistemul electoral pe care îl avem pentru că sunt ei acolo și chestii de genul ăsta. Oamenii, se satură de asta. Adică dacă văd că, lucrurile nu merg într-o direcție bună, fie că l-aleg pe ăla, fie că l-aleg pe ăla, fie că l-aleg pe ăla, what the fuck? Și atunci încep să zici, păi noi mergem prost pentru că, ei de fapt au făcut aia ca să așa, intri în, președintele nostru de fapt face alte mânării cu aia pe la spate, se înțelege cu aia, interese mari la mijloc, etc. Și ești așa într-o bulă din asta de, uite că eu nu sunt chiar noi, chiar cum credem noi, cum bla bla bla, și ajungi pe linia asta de, intri în narațiunea asta. Cu The Alt-Right Pipeline, pe care o numește el în video, nu se vede aici că am dat eu prea jos, dar Jesus Christ. Dar practic așa se numește asta, How I Escaped the Alt-Right Pipeline. Și da, hai să vedem mai departe.
Also be listening to the Young Turks and listening about Occupy Wall Street. So when I was young, I was just a sort of contrarian hipster. I'm not like a communist, but I'm definitely not a capitalist, and I'm definitely left-wing, and I definitely voted to remain in the EU referendum. And so time goes by, I grow up, and I remember I got, I had a few jobs working like fucking Sainsbury's or B&Q, and that was further fueling my sort of anti-capitalist feelings. But I remember I got one job, and I met this geezer, and he was a proper right-winger.
Capitalism is good because capitalism is freedom. Socialism is bad because socialism is tyranny.
It was like a right-winger in the flesh. I'd never seen one before. I was like, what the fuck hell is this?
Gen, el povestește aici, știu că arată subtitrele, dar uneori subtitrele merg ca curul. El povestește aici că, efectiv, a lucrat în ăsta corporatist în care au avut un job de jos, cum mai vedem noi, the first liners, să zicem, sunt cei care duc greu din punctul meu de vedere, care ați văzut mai înainte în video, care au efectiv chestiile, de a lua chestiile grele, să le pună dintr-o parte în alta, efectiv de asta zic că duc greu, literalmente, își rup spatele ca să care chestii, stau până târziu noaptea ca să curețe chestii, să se asigure că ăla merge unde trebuie. Evident, la un moment dat te saturi și nu mai faci chestia asta de 100 de ori. Dar asta zicea el, că a lucrat acolo și cumva chestia asta, lucrând în mediul ăsta aiurist, te face să nu prea mai vrei să mai fii pro-capitalism, nu? Pentru că te simți exploatat. Și la un moment dat s-a schimbat jobul și a ajuns să dea de un tip de ăsta care era mega de dreapta. Și de dreapta, pentru cine nu știe și pentru cine nu realizează, dreapta e asociat cu capitalismul. Stânga e asociat cu socialismul. Și atunci, capitalismul, fiind așa, având niște idei din asta de, bă, nu-mi place că mă exploatează ăsta, șeful meu se comportă nașpa cu mine, ce naiba de job e ăsta de nu pot să am și eu impact sau ceva. Evident că joburile astea se simt ca și când ai fi sclăvit, pentru că natura lor e de astfel. De aia cumva eu sunt pro adăugarea unor, nu știu, mașinării din asta. Ați văzut că unii conduceau acolo, dar tot e boring. Adică, na, cineva care să-ți facă chestia asta automat, să nu mai trebuiască tu să stai neapărat acolo. Cineva trebuie să le facă și pe asta, nu? So, people that do these jobs have my utmost respect. Da, și el a ajuns cu retorica asta să se gândească că, bă, nu-mi place, nu știu ce, și după aia a dat de un tip care susține tocmai ideea pe care el nu ajungea să nu suporte. Și acum să vedem ce se întâmplă.
Capitalism good, welfare state bad, NHS bad. But you see, although I
NHS este National Health Service în UK. Gen Ministerul Sănătății, mă rog, nu ministerul, dar Serviciul Național de Sănătate. Și atunci, vedeți, ăștia capitaliștii zic că nu-i bine cu
capitalism good, welfare state bad.
Statul bunăstării e rău, adică bunăstare în sensul că statul investește în chestii pentru noi ca să, gen, noi plătim ca el mai apoi să investească în chestii pentru ca noi să putem prospera, să trăim într-o lume cât de cât ok, decentă, cu să avem resurse, să le putem împărți între noi și să fie toată lumea fericită, nu știu, transport public în comun de înaltă calitate, educație de înaltă calitate, servicii de sănătate de înaltă calitate și gratuite, dacă se poate, adică, mă rog, gratuite nu în totalitate, dar gratuite până la un anumit punct, educația să fie tot așa finanțată de stat, etc., etc. Și el a întâlnit pe tipul ăsta care era împotriva lucrurilor ăsta și serviciul de sănătate la fel, era împotriva lui și probabil cerea privatizarea sănătății. Cum mai avem și noi nebunile la noi pe astăzi, domnul Năsui, mă uit la tine, adică efectiv, what the fuck, bro? Când, privatizarea sănătății este de dorit, dar nu este de dorit deloc.
NHS bad? But you see, although I deeply disagreed with all of his views at the beginning, you gotta remember 13-year-old contrarian Jimmy. He's still in there somewhere. And what he's hearing is contrarian views, you say. Anti-establishment, non-mainstream. Little old hipster Jimmy.
Da, acum depinde și de cum e statul în care crești. Noi crescând, adică eu cel puțin crescând într-o Românie care e pur, sau încearcă să fie, mă rog, așa mai de, nu știu, politicile noastre nu sunt chiar full capitaliste acum. Adică dacă te uiți la noi avem taxe destul de mari acum că nu se duc unde trebuie. This is the other problem. Dar spre deosebire de alte state, la noi avem un sistem de sănătate în cârje și care moare, dar îl avem și, adică nu e ca în SUA să trebuiască să dai $2000 pentru că chemi ambulanța, literalmente $2000 pentru că suni la ambulanță, search-it, e în jur de $1000 dacă suni ambulanța. Imaginează tu să suni la salvare și să zică, am ajuns la spital, aveți bonul aici și puteți să plătiți cu cardul sau când ajungeți acasă prin QR code aplicația noastră. Este cam $1200. Mulțumim. Sau 4000, whatever, 5000 de lei. Păi cred că mori. Na, și ajungem la chestiile astea cu el care povestește aici de fapt că, deși era împotriva tipului ăla cu care lucra, micul Jimmy, care vorbise înainte despre 11 septembrie 2001 în America și despre cum guvernul american, conspirațiile alea pe care le avea el, și era împotriva establishmentului, că asta e ideea, e anti-establishment. Acum dacă în Marea Britanie establishmentul era ăsta cu social welfare state, cu un stat care să dea pentru oameni chestii, nu, prin taxe, atunci tu, dacă ai fi anti-establishment, ai fi împotriva chestiei ălea pe față de care ai trecut, nu? Și atunci la fel și el îl aude pe ăsta cu, nu ne e bine, așa, pentru că X, Y, Z, uite, avem statul ăsta, și era practic împotriva NHS, care nu era neapărat establishment movement, era o chestie de bun simț, adică, ei taxezi oamenii, dar le dai un serviciu. NHS chiar e un serviciu de ok, din câte știu, adică acum nu știu cum mai e, dar la un moment dat știu că făceam adică mă uitam la videoclipuri despre chestia asta și înainte să iasă din UE, cel puțin, era unul dintre cele mai top servicii medicale din lume. Și cred că încă e, dar we shall see, pentru că din nou, NHS-ul nu este privat, Serviciul Național de Sănătate este susținut din bani publici, adică la fel cum și spitalele de la noi și sistemul de sănătate de la noi este susținut din bani publici, most of it, pentru că avem și spitale private, which are obviously not, dar NHS este susținut din bani publici și poți să vezi că se poate să faci un sistem performant din bani publici, dacă nu se vrea. Așa, și el asta spunea, că e anti-establishment, da, încurci, asociezi establishmentul cu ce vezi acolo, fizic, nu înseamnă neapărat că aia a vrut establishmentul, doar că dacă vezi că merge ceva, uneori nu strici, uneori îl lași acolo. NHS, asta cred eu că s-a întâmplat cu el, au fost lăsat acolo, indiferent de cine a venit la putere în Marea Britanie, că era de dreapta, că era de stânga, rar cred că a umblat la el. Până în prezent.
Right-wing rhetoric because I realized it was different to everyone else, and that would make me interesting if I believed all these things, right? And like when I say right-wing, it's not, we don't like foreigners. It's stuff like this.
The people who get on welfare lose their human independence and feeling of dignity. They become subject to the dictates and whims of their welfare supervisor, who can tell them whether they can live here or there, whether they may put in a telephone, what they may do with their lives. They're treated like children.
So now I'm at the doors of the alt-right.
Da, deci se bagă în cap o astfel de retorică la modul că, dacă plătești taxe, practic te vin statului. Poți să facă ce vrea cu tine, ești tralala. Ei vor să, ești efectiv controlat de stat. Ești fraier, te tratează ca pe copii. Mamă, și când auzi pe asta pe mine mă tratează statul ca pe copii, bă? Și atunci încep să, ia stai mă, că ia că nu mai vreau eu sistem de sănătate din ăla, ia că nu mai vreau eu educația să mai fie dată de stat, păi ce, să-mi indoctrineze copiii cum fac ei? Nu, lasă că îi trimit eu la o școală privată unde fac ea cum vor ei, se duc cum vor ei, fac ce vor ei. Nu funcționează așa. De multe ori, profesorii care sunt la școli private ajung să fie acolo de la școli finanțate de stat, pentru că, sunt bani mai mulți, most of the time. Acum, depinde de sistemul de învățământ din fiecare stat.
Pipeline, right? I pick up my hat with the light, turn the torch on, grab my pickaxe and
Și asta zicea acum că după ce auzise toate astea de la tipul ăla cu care lucra, acum era la ușa extremei drepte, dreptei alternative de care zice aici. Ideologiei de dreapta și își pune casca, ia pică.
Head in. And the first stop is Jordan Peterson.
And then if I'd said to you, please, I'd rather go by she, how would you respond to that on a personal level? How would...
The way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're projecting publicly.
How can I describe the fact that someone who was once a woman, and really still is, had her breasts cut off because she, he, they, them had fallen prey to a viciously harmful fad?
So bear in mind, I didn't go to university. I
had fallen prey to a
Asta cu România la pinul lui? LOL.
Viciously harmful fad.
So bear in mind, I didn't go to university. I went and just tried to make little businesses. I did a parkour brand. I ran a vegan food store. I did lots of little things. And very importantly, I was not academic. Jordan Peterson, to young Jimmy, sounded like how I imagine smart people sound.
So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
He would.
Your goodness in relationship implicitly, you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
Da, deci aici ne arată cum Jordan Peterson pare că este inteligent printre cei care nu au fost la universități sau la facultăți, pentru că dacă ai minimum de educație și îți dai seama efectiv că ăsta folosește un limbaj atât de elevat doar ca să... este o strategie efectiv folosită și de cei care vor să intre în politică prin... you can look in history, efectiv să vezi încercările celor care au ajuns în politică cum au ajuns și poți să vezi că există retorica asta foarte care vrea să sune academică. Academică în sensul că folosește cuvinte elevate, neologisme, multe, aruncate ala în dala, uneori n-având sens în propoziție, dar pentru cel care nu le cunoaște acum nu stau să caut pe Google ce înseamnă cuvântul X, o să o iau că el pare că știe, că altfel n-ar folosi cuvântul ăla, nu? Ba da, l-ar folosi. Și l-ar folosi ca să-ți dea așa, peste nas. Ca să zică, uite frate, eu știu și sunt aici cu o adunătură de oi care habar n-au de ce sunt aici, eu doar le iau banii pentru că e un curs al meu sau o prezentare a mea sau o conferință a mea pe bani, pentru că eu nu vin aici să fac muncă de caritate, pentru că munca de caritate e de stânga, socialism, mie nu-mi place socialismul, așa că can go fuck yourself. So da, Jordan Peterson.
He would use big words, he would do this with his hands, he would think and contemplate, like he was the sort of caricature of a smart person. And it was very interesting because all of his views tended to be quite contrarian to sort of mainstream views. And he would, again, like my friend, he would talk about the benefits of capitalism. He would talk about natural hierarchies and that it wasn't capitalism's fault for hierarchies, but hierarchies are natural. And so it's very interesting because if you think about what Jordan Peterson is and what he thinks and his words now, back in 2016, it was very different, right?
As a matter of respect, in fact, would you refer to a trans person who asked you to use the they them pronouns, a pronoun which has a several hundred-year historical...
But that's not what we're talking about.
He rises to fame on what he is portraying as a free speech battle. The Canadian government are trying to make it so that if you say the wrong pronouns to a transgender person, you will go to jail. And Jordan Peterson never says something like, I don't believe in trans people and so I don't believe I should say their pronouns. He's not saying that people who do transgender surgeries are butchers. He is saying that by law, I shouldn't be forced to say anything.
Difference between saying that there's something you can't say and saying that there are things that you have to say. And I regard these made-up pronouns, all of them, as the neologisms of radical PC authoritarians.
As I grew up, I kind of realized he misrepresented this bill and he was blowing things out of proportion. But if we just take it on face value and believe what he was saying, then yeah, it seemed illogical to oppose what he was saying. And so whilst I'm going through Jordan Peterson's books, his podcasts, his speeches, etc., I'm getting this feeling that there's this sort of crazy, indoctrinated Marxist left who are trying to suppress your freedom and usher in communism. And so all this is happening all the way in Canada where no one gives a fuck about. But what about here in Britain, right? In Britain, we have a sort of similar scenario. And it involves a man, a very controversial man, by the name of Tommy Robinson. Before we go any further, I want to give a massive shout out to today's sponsor, Squarespace.
Ok, ne întoarcem la Tommy Robinson.
Time and it's very good quality. Just have a website. Use the code TimmyTheGiant. Anyway, back to the video.
This book is the reason. This book is the reason we're in such a mess.
Omul meu a luat Coranul în mână și a zis că motivul pentru toate problemele noastre e că această carte există. Pentru că Coranul există, toate problemele lumii există. Exista Coranul, n-ar mai fi fost probleme. Te-ai uitat vreodată, bro, la inchiziții? La... știi ceva? La ce crime au comis creștini? În fine. Dar ăsta e genul de politician care a fost promovat la un moment dat în, era zic, Marile Unite, în the UK, în Marea Britanie, ca un băi, din câte mi-aduc aminte, pentru Brexit. Era gen aruncat acolo, cauzează și tu problema asta, vorbește, fă-te auzit, bla bla bla, bagă retorica asta cum că îți taie, uite acolo, freedom of speech, hashtag free Tommy, cum că îți taie dreptul la liberă exprimare, cum că te bagă la pornaie și statul e fascist, totalitar, whatever, Coreea de Nord. Avea un tricou cu Coreea de Nord, o să-l vedeți în video și efectiv, din punctul meu de vedere, o narațiune care făcea pur și simplu să destabilizeze populația și să-i facă să fie mai dezbinați. Pentru că e clar că dacă te uite la retorica lui bro, adică el efectiv nu judecă ce, și n-am mai vorbit, n-am mai ieșit din un câmp peisaj cu ce se întâmplă în Rusia acum și să judece ce fac rușii, adică creștinii ortodoxi. Și s-au uitat să vadă mai mult la ce fac islamiștii, care bineînțeles sunt, mă rog, islamiștii, people, că na, islamismul e altceva față de islamismul, ideologie, islamul e religia. Și atunci, el axându-se pe chestia asta cu Coranul, lovea la sentiment pe mulți oameni care vedeau peste tot că arabii sunt teroriști și tralala. Și îți dai seama că e o retorică foarte ușor de... o retorică foarte ușor de abordat, o retorică foarte ușor de aplicat la o mare pătură de oameni care, by nature, din cauza capitalismului și din cauza că suntem rasiști, ajută, adică pe el îl ajută efectiv narațiunea asta, narativa îl ajută tot. Deci Coranul pentru el este the main sellout point. Tratează, politica a ajuns să fie tratată ca pe un business. What is your sellout point? Iei o chestie, o faci, te uiți în jurul tău să vezi ce înjură oamenii cel mai mult, more or less, sau despre ce se discută în masele populației. Iei chestia aia, te duci, începi să fii vocal pe internet împotriva chestii alea, după aia ajungi ca oamenii să te placă. Georgescu style. Doar că el a apărut dintr-o dată. Așa și ăsta a apărut dintr-o dată. There was no such thing as Tommy Robinson înainte.
Boys, I'm not proud of this, but I'm just being an honest person. I'm trying to explain where I was at, how I got to where I was, and how I am where I am now. And so I come across Tommy Robinson in this period of time where he goes to jail for, as he's presenting it to the audience online, trying to report on Muslim grooming gangs. He goes to jail. And I see this as a suppression of journalism, a suppression of free speech by a tyrannical government. You know, and I ignored the fact that it was contempt of court, and he knew exactly it was contempt of court, and he did it deliberately to provoke this reaction. But the way it was being presented was very clever. Again, it was all about free speech. It wasn't about the underlying issue of Islam, etc., but it was just about free speech. And so when you're already primed to be sort of libertarian, pro-free speech, and you're perceiving these attacks on free speech, you start to wonder, why are they attacking these people for their speech? And it unfortunately has this effect of making you think that the person is a truth teller and the government are trying to suppress them. And
Galileo Gambit. Traduc și pentru voi. Someone claims they must be right because they've been criticized or mocked, often for disagreeing with the scientific consensus. Și zic că deci cineva își asumă că trebuie să aibă dreptate pentru că au fost criticați sau luați la mișto, pentru că sunt cumva la părți diametral opuse cu un consens științific, adică efectiv spui că pământul e plat, cum e în chestia asta, doar pentru că de-aia. Și trebuie să am dreptate pentru că sunt împotriva științei. Așa, și că tipul care ține pământul plat în mână zice că au făcut mișto de Galileo și l-au făcut un negaționist. Așa că și eu am dreptate. Gen, doar pentru că Galileo a avut dreptate cu privire la faptul că chestia asta cu pământul nu se învârte așa, înseamnă că și eu am dreptate pentru că sunt așa cu știința. Nu. Așa, și zice aici, cred că...
And it reinforces your belief.
Ce spune? Că să te simți persecutat nu e același lucru cu a fi corect.
And what they're saying must have some truth to it. if they want to hide it so bad. And these people, these what I would now consider grifters, they know that. They know that that's the response and the feeling it's going to create in people. They want to be martyrs because then people will follow them even more ardently.
It's so important for the establishment because they know I've reached the people. They know
Free Tommy Robinson and free him now.
Și gândiți-vă că oamenii care au organizat toată chestia asta știau că aici se va ajunge și știau că oamenii vor reacționa așa și știau. Deci eu stau să mă uit acum la ăla care gânduse la oameni și era gen, bă, totul merge fix cum vrem noi, frate. Efectiv, ăștia ies în stradă pentru că ne-a ieșit schema. Luați-o în statul.
And so yeah, I go to like a rally, like a free speech rally when Tommy Robinson's about to go to jail, and I come across Nico, and I see Nico, and I've seen him online, and I saw how he was trying to present everyone that went to a Tommy Robinson rally as a racist. And I knew from my perspective, and knowing who I was, I knew I wasn't a racist. And so I go up to Nico and I tell the people around him that he's trolling you and he's trying to like make you look stupid online. And then Nico does misrepresent me in the video, and he says that I went up to the police and told them to get rid of Nico.
The police then came over and surprise, he started crying to them as well.
When in reality, I was actually saying to the police that Nico has his free speech. Because, you know, I'm fucking obsessed with free speech in this period of time. I don't know why. I think it's the single most important thing on earth. But either way, like, as much as I disagree with myself for being at that rally and supporting Tommy Robinson in that time, I still stand by the fact that I don't think these people understood why people were presenting them as racist, right? And I just want to touch on that.
Tell me a Trump policy right now.
I support...
Fake, waffle. You're waffling, man. Yeah, answer the question.
I support his trade policy.
How dare you fake this? How dare you?
You know, now, from, you know, the view I have now, I understand there are sort of two types of racism. There's like overt racism, which is like, you know, I fucking hate migrants when you send them back, they're the worst. And then you have this kind of more like subconscious racism, or like in effect racism. And what I mean by that is, like, I knew I wasn't racist because I grew up very multiculturally and I liked people of different races. I had lots of friendships with them and I got along with them very well. So I never in my heart felt anything bad towards people of different races. But what can happen from there is when you think you're like immune to racism, you sometimes are more susceptible to it in a way, but just a different type of racism. These grifters know they can't just say that, I don't know, black people are inferior genetically, although some of them have started doing that again. They've found sneakier ways of wrapping it, often by hiding behind culture. These pundits will lie and say stuff like 84% of grooming gangs are Asian Pakistani, which has been endlessly disproven. It is white people who make up the majority of grooming gangs. But all this misinformation can lead you to believe that their culture is inferior to ours, and therefore we can't mix. And with the Tommy Robinson thing, it's kind of the same when it comes to Islam, right? You didn't hate people for being like having brown skin. You were simply critiquing their ideology, their beliefs.
You wouldn't do that with
Sir William
Would you do that with the Bible? Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Show some respect.
Have you read this book?
For people.
Have you read this book?
There are over
There's
a billion people.
So, you know, I'm listening to the greatest hits, right? I'm listening to Ben Shapiro debate some 12-year-old feminist. I'm listening to Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh, I'm Joe Rogan till I fucking die. And I find myself accepting that I must be right-wing now. And, you know, little hipster Jimmy, that's cool because now I'm different to everyone. I'm the contrarian, right? I have all the different opinions. Oh no, the sky isn't blue. Actually, no, it's a shade of maroon. And like when you're listening to all this stuff, you get this sort of impression of the left, like what you're perceiving the left to be like, basically the worst of the left.
You know you're a millennial when you question whether or not it's ethical to bring children into this world because of climate change. We don't really know whether or not the world's going to be habitable in 30 years.
And so you just get pushed further and further right from more of a reactionary position rather than some actual ideological and maybe academic understanding of economies and politics. It just sort of is a feeling. And it's so funny, like when Ben Shapiro and these sort of people get famous off of facts don't care about your feelings. But to be honest, like conservatives these days, it just seems to be mainly emotion. It's how they feel about topics. They hate when you bring up academic papers and actual facts, and they don't trust any of that.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
And either way, I find myself as a right-winger. I have not descended into overt...
Man, efectiv, nu mai contează. Deci, academicienii, săracii, tu dai seama să muncești în domeniul cercetării și să da mă, dar am văzut la TV. Degeaba am zis tu mie că nu există raport. Ce înseamnă raportul ăla? Cine l-a făcut? Tu crezi că eu nu știu că hai bă, mă lași pe mine cu
overtly racist beliefs or overtly transphobic beliefs, misogynistic beliefs. I haven't gone that far, but I probably do house some sort of unconscious discriminatory beliefs in maybe trans people, perhaps even women to a degree. Again, often wrapping their push for equality and better rights as some kind of Marxist revolution. But I believe in the typical sort of right-wing viewpoint that the state should be smaller, that people are responsible for themselves, and probably that like poor people are just lazy and they need to fix their own shit, and that billionaires and corporations are really good and like, you know, sort of, unless they're the ones that, I don't know, Russell Brand says is bad, and then all of a sudden they're bad because they're tied to, I don't know, George Soros. George Soros business, bad. Bill Gates business, bad. But Elon Musk buying Twitter, good. Very good. Anyway, I'm deep in the pipeline, right? I'm deep.
Asta spunea despre el atunci că credea, nu despre ce crede acum ca idee.
I'm deep. COVID happens. Obviously, I don't get vaxxed. I don't wear the mask. I'm sorry if I killed anyone. And, you know, again, I regret that position now. I literally didn't want to get vaxxed, not because I thought it had 5G in it or something, but just because I was so sort of libertarian right wing that I didn't like the fact the government were telling me to do it. And like, I don't know, I'm here today, I'm vaccinated, and the woke police haven't come to my door yet, so probably I was overreacting.
Vaccine passports. While we've been looking in other directions, they are being slowly yet deliberately introduced. Are they the linchpin in a global surveillance network?
So you might be wondering, like, what was the moment? Like, when did it all change? When did the dam break? And there was a moment, right? And I can kind of point to it specifically. And it was through making my videos. Now, as you know, you guys watching, you're probably really into all the social, political stuff I do. But originally, I was a parkour YouTuber. And then I become like an extreme sports YouTuber. And when I got to the end of this period in 2022, I wanted to diversify my content, right? And I remember genuinely, I thought I was probably even going to make like those sort of right-wing documentary series, like things like Jen or like some of Moon's stuff, you know, that kind of thing. I thought I'd end up in that ilk. But you see, because I was a smart bruh and I could read the room, I knew that I couldn't make a video why Jordan Peterson's the best man alive. I knew I had to take my time to kind of meander. So I made a video on a very specific topic about chavs.
Clothing brands that you didn't like were called chavs. Rough neighborhoods were considered chav infested. But what exactly is a chav? And most importantly, where did they all go?
And so I made this video. It's really interesting if you rewatch it, because my biases and all of my thinking going into this video is that chavs are bad because they were dickheads and they chose to be bad. But whilst making the video and wanting to address the question, like, where did chavs go? Why did they disappear? I stumbled across a geezer called Owen Jones. I see Owen Jones and all of my, but you see it in the video. I'm like,
Curios de ce nu au mai tradus partea aia din video pe YouTube cu autogenerare, pentru că vorbea aceeași limbă ca asta. În fine, practic el zicea acum că în timp ce făcea un video de, să zic așa, cercetare despre so-called chavs, care era un grup, nu o adunătură, că erau mai mulți, era un fel de stereotip aruncat unor oameni pentru felul în care se comportau, și el trăia cu impresia că ei sunt niște oameni răi pentru că alegeau să fie așa, pentru că erau gen leneși, se complăceau în condiția lor în care erau, bla bla bla, tot felul de chestii din astea. Și în timp ce făcea cercetarea pentru videoclipul respectiv, a dat de tipul ăsta Owen Jones, care a, believe it or not, făcut o carte despre chavs și a citit despre chestia aia și probabil o să vedeți acum că a realizat că nu e chiar cum crede el că sunt lucrurile, și de aici pornește shift-ul lui de la a fi în dreapta spre stânga, pentru că realizez că nu, și că ăștia care vorbesc în nu știu, Andrew Tate type Jordan Peterson shit. Sunt efectiv doar niște mâncători de...
Look, guys, I'm about to quote Owen Jones. I don't agree with him, but what he says about chavs is really interesting. You should probably listen to it.
Truly a war in the public sphere. The author and journalist Owen Jones, who I have to admit I don't really agree with him on a lot, he wrote an entire book called Chavs.
So I read it and I'm like, fuck, maybe chavs were like a product of their environment and their economic status. Bear in mind, this is the opposite. This is the antithesis of my view, is that I would have believed as a right-winger that cultures are just like people who make decisions to behave in the way they want to. So these are bad people who are choosing to be bad.
Exactly. Și de fapt...
So after this video, I go down.
Asta e diferența, știi? Pentru că de fapt ai o bază cu niște chestii pe care le crezi natură, dar de fapt astea ajungi cumva să realizezi că sunt niște lucruri date pe care nu le poți controla, adică mediul în care crești. Nu-l poți controla, bro. Nu-l poți controla pentru că te naști acolo. Ok? Te naști acolo. Nu poți tu să te duci bebeluș de 1 an la părinții tăi și să le zici, hei, hai să ne mutăm de aici că nu-mi place cartierul, că what the fuck, nu. O să crești acolo, în funcție de cum ți este alocată școala, o să mergi acolo în funcție de sistemul în care credi. Deci, din nou, având în vedere că planeta nu e la fel, evident, fiecare țară are politicile lui, fiecare țară are mediile lor în care crești. Nu e la fel și să crești în, evident, în România, cum e să crești în Serbia sau cum e să crești în România, cum e să crești în Venezuela sau Uruguay. Sunt țări care efectiv au altfel de sisteme și atunci, în funcție de cum crești în sistemul ăla, așa o să ajungi să fii mai târziu. La noi, în mare parte, sunt culturile astea care au crescut de mult timp într-un fel, adică mă refer aici la minorități, în mare parte. Și atunci, minoritățile etnice, de exemplu, de la noi s-au simțit nebăgate în seamă deloc și ignorate, ba dimpotrivă, opresate de către noi de foarte mult timp. Și atunci când vii și crești într-un mediu în care ăștia care au fost opresați de alții ajung să se răzbune pe tine pentru că, na, așa au fost învățați ei, deci nu, din nou, nu e vina lor, atunci și tu o să crești ca zicând, bă, ăștia aleg să fie răi cu mine pentru că așa sunt ei, răi. Nu, asta e o ideologie tâmpită. Trebuie să te uiți mai adânc în problemă și să realizezi că au crescut într-un mediu ostil și au crescut într-un mediu în care nimeni nu le-a arătat ce înseamnă compasiune sau că vor ca ei să trăiască cu ei și să fie integrați în comunitate și să se înțeleagă unii cu alții. Și atunci sunt reacționari, reacționează la mediul în care au crescut, nu sunt ei așa de la mama natură, nu îi face mama natura așa. No one is born evil, no one is born good. Noi pur și simplu suntem reacționari, adică crești într-un mediu, reacționezi la mediul ăla. Asta încearcă să zică și the left wing, adică efectiv suntem la modul omul nu e așa de la natură. Cei din dreapta încearcă să zică, ba da, el e așa pentru că e în controlul vieții lui, el face, cum să fii în controlul vieții tale la 1 an? Deci, practic ajungi la 14 ani și ești gen, păi da, ce ți s-a întâmplat până la 14 ani, tu trebuie să realizezi și de acolo, de la 14 ani, practic îți începe viața și conștiința și nu știu ce. Fă-ți un business începând cu 6 ani.
Different rabbit holes. I'm making different subcultures. I do skinheads and I do football hooligans, which are both in a very interesting period of time, which is the Thatcher era. And the more I research into Thatcher and see how she completely flipped this country on its head, she completely radicalized Britain into being extreme neoliberal capitalists. And it's kind of become just assumed that that's how the world has always worked, that's how we are. But then I discovered that at some point in society, we weren't fucking insane capitalists that we are right now. I've discovered this because there was a period of time called the post-war consensus, which I talk about fucking endlessly on this channel. But in that period of time, we followed a style of economics that was called Keynesianism, which meant that the government's job was to make sure everyone was employed and to tax the wealthy at higher rates, use that money to build infrastructure that benefited the people. And then bear in mind, you know, I'm listening to Donald Trump saying, make America great again, and everyone's harping on about how the world was better back in like the 60s and 50s. And then I find out the reason why it was better was because we had mass public investment. This investment led to the greatest economic boom in history, raised many of the working class into the middle class, which created a whole host of new industries, new products, basically, it was good shit. What we did then was good. And you know, you got to bear in mind that I am being told the only answer to life's problems is dog eat dog, free market capitalism. Get the government out of everything. The government can do nothing right. Only the geniuses of commerce can do anything, like our water supply that has no piss and poo in it, or like our really quick and definitely on time and affordable train system, or like our really affordable housing that people definitely aren't speculating on and shrinking the middle class.
Private water companies are dumping huge amounts of raw sewage in Britain's rivers and off its coastlines. They're doing so to save money, to ensure returns for shareholders, and by extension, to guarantee massive salaries for bosses at the top.
And so yeah, time's going past, man, and I'm learning this shit, and I'm like, fuck, and I'm starting to realize, like, I don't know if I believe all the things that I believe about right-wing politics, but I hadn't accepted it, right? I was becoming more and more distrustful. Things like this, right? 1 month I went on holiday to Thailand. I walk in a coffee shop and I see the most beautiful woman on earth, who is now my wife, and she is Ukrainian. I go to Ukraine. Literally, during the war, I've been to Ukraine many times, and I've experienced air raids. I've heard bombs go off.
There again, more attacks. Putin must be having a slow day.
All the while, I look on my phone at all the right-wingers talking about Ukraine, and they believe that Zelensky is like, I don't know, a blue-haired feminist or something.
I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
And they're trying to say that it's actually NATO, and NATO are the bad guys, and America's bad, even though we're pro-America, America is bad. And, you know, I'm learning more about the Ukrainian conflict and all the history of how it came to be and why we defend them and why we can't allow Russia to just go and take over sovereign nations. And so you learn more and more about this. But then there was two people I come across that really like cemented the change, right? So I'm becoming distrustful of the right. I'm starting to see, like, you know, their takes on Ukraine as being ridiculous. And then I come across a streamer. So right now we're deep in the sort of Andrew Tate era. Andrew Tate has blown up, and at first it was kind of, you know, it was kind of fun. It was like, especially if you're sort of a young right-wing libertarian type, you need to get strong to look after yourself, look after women, looking after the people you love. Like, that sort of stuff was kind of nice. I started going to the gym, I started doing all that stuff. I was always sort of into the self-help stuff, so all that shit sounded good. And then he started to talk about women.
To some degree, as a man, you have to instill drama in the relationship, because if you don't, she's going to get bored.
No, that's very true, man.
And she's either going to leave, or she will instill the drama, which gives her control.
Then you're seeing all these Fresh and Fit podcasts and Sneeko and all this crazy shit, and you're seeing like people making their entire livings complaining about women, and you're like, what the fuck is this? And there was one bro who would go on these shows, and his name was Destiny.
Women fare a lot better post-divorce than men do, bro. And the reason why is because they get the resource, they get the money, they get the children, they get put in a better situation financially.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Dude, they get the house. Moms don't live good on child support. That's not true. What? Have you ever seen a bitch on child support? She's not living the greatest fucking life. Women fare worse than men in almost every degree after divorces. So the idea of pretending...
What are you talking about?
They make more money. They have better dating strategies afterwards. Men just do better than women in almost every single metric post-divorce.
What? Bro?
Destiny was really interesting because he was a lefty and he was proud to be.
Man, what? How? Nah, you must be lying. Nah. You come here to our podcast to inside. Nah, this guy is lying. Came here, he's the left wing. Of course he's lying. All they do is lie. All they do is lie. No? Oh my god, ăsta a fost și cu Ben Shapiro. Oh my god. S-a văzut cu Ben Shapiro, I'm dead.
Lefty. He didn't try and hide. He didn't say he was like a centrist. He was like, no, I'm on the left. But he didn't play into like the left-wing woke crazy stereotype. He was just a normal dude who presented left-wing ideas but was really good at debating. Now remember, debating the left up until this point was Ben Shapiro debating a 4-year-old. But now you're seeing someone who's actually quite well versed in the beliefs of the right wing, debating them and winning a lot. So I get into Destiny, right? And I even was going to make a video on Destiny. I might do it again one day. And I had a conversation with him on a stream, but I was so right-wing at the time, I didn't know how to make the video because I kind of had this mental block between really asking him sort of questions. But then the final nail in the coffin for me, at the point where I realized I was no longer right-wing, was when I came across Gary's economics.
You need to have structures in place in your economy that prevent
the rich from taking all of the wealth. If you don't have that, history teaches us the rich get all of the wealth. And once the rich have all of the wealth, ordinary people end up with very poor living conditions. You know, if you go to countries that are very unequal, India, South Africa, you know, almost anywhere in Latin America, very unequal societies lead to very poor living standards.
Gary is like a working class geezer, and he became super wealthy as a trader, and his whole thesis was that income inequality is gonna get worse, and he betted on that. He made money predicting that, and it came to fruition. Income inequality has got much worse. And what's interesting, right, is he talks about income inequality and why it was bad and why it's bad for house prices and cost of living, etc. But the thing is, and I don't know if he doesn't really talk about this too much, but it unlocked this vault in the back of my brain. It was this old memory of a clip that Jordan Peterson had put out. And it was him talking about the correlation between income inequality and crime.
You know, you always hear this idea that poverty causes crime. That's a classic left-wing idea, but it's wrong. What causes crime, especially aggressive crime, is relative poverty. Poverty is when you don't have enough to eat. Relative poverty is when the guy next door has a much better car than you.
The right wing really love to argue about culture. They always say that, like, it's people's, the problems in society comes from people's ideas and beliefs and their values, which is super convenient, right? Because when anything goes bad, you can just say that, oh, well, it's because people are lazy or they're radical Marxist or this. All the while, there's no solution to that, right? What can you do? You can't change people's minds. So it's just like, oh, well, I guess we just have to accept the status quo. But when you fundamentally challenge that view,
or marginalize them și să-i dai afară din societate și să nu-i mai iei în considerare și să-i radicalizezi și mai rău pentru că faci politici împotriva, să-i demonizezi, adică.
Sort of outcomes come from culture and people's individual decisions. And you start to realize that outcomes, you know, like negative outcomes, crime, poverty, people having less families, having less kids, that maybe doesn't come from culture. Maybe the reason that men and women aren't having kids and getting married isn't because they're no longer Christian and they don't believe in families and the nuclear family. Maybe it's because no one can fucking afford to have families. Maybe it's because most people in their 20s still haven't moved out of their parents' house. Maybe it's because they don't make enough money between two people to afford to have a child. There's all these things that are happening, and you realize that probably the economic system is causing this. And it isn't just that the testosterone levels in men have dropped because, I don't know, they've fucking touched receipts or something. And so yeah, the sort of like the needle drop, is that the expression? The pin drop? It all sort of made sense. I realized that I actually don't think everything is culture, and I think mainly things come from economics. I think most culture comes from economics. And like, yeah, of course, attitudes, values, beliefs, they also have an impact, but I think you cannot understate economics. And so from there, as I've had my fucking left-wing epiphany, my left-wiffany, I start to really realize, like, kind of the woke stuff. Yeah, it's annoying. Do we need to argue about if there's an egg in a salad emoji? Is that really that important? And you start seeing, like, I don't know, Matt Walsh, where he's done this whole documentary, What is a Woman? And he's the expert in this, going on Joe Rogan, being asked how many kids are on puberty blockers because this is the real fucking moral panic.
How many people have had this done? Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but it's, if we're talking about the drugs, it's, I mean, millions.
It's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
If your politics spends more time talking about, I don't know, what toilet a transgendered person is going to piss in, or the woke brigade, if it spends more time on that than the cost of living, the housing crisis, rising inequality, things that, you know, are actually important and actually affect your lives, if you're more focused on the former, then I hate to say it, but you've been bamboozled.
Google react to radical vegans screaming away by removing the egg from their salad emoji.
So what?
What about my rights as somebody who loves eggs to have the egg in the emoji?
It's an endless trope, these sort of moral
Imagine about not having an egg in an emoji, or imagine crying about having to remove an egg from an emoji. Bro. Da, eu nu cred că lucrurile astea se vor rezolva și nu cred că dreapta asta va continua să se ducă mai moderat și nu spre extrem. Asta pentru că deja, cum o zic și ei mai înainte, banii au ajuns deja la cei bogați și ca să poți să iei banii de la cei bogați trebuie să-i taxezi, doar că nu poți să-i taxezi pentru că cei de la putere deja sunt mână-mână cu cei bogați și dacă îi taxează pe cei bogați, ori dacă nu se mână-mână cu ei, dar vor să-i taxeze, au teama asta că vor pleca din țară, ceea ce nu este fondată, lasă-i să plece, let's see what happens.
Panics, these clutching of pearls over social issues tend to seemingly always happen when there's economic problems. Like, I think it was in the 70s where they tried to ban Dungeons and Dragons, the board game, because it was satanic and demonic. It just so happened that the 70s was like a massive economic crisis. And so, yeah, the more I made these videos, the more I started to see these patterns, right? These patterns between the 20s and the 30s, the rise of fascism in the West, and how that seemed to tie in with the Great Depression. And then you notice that in the 70s and the 80s, you see the rise of the National Front, the racists and all this sort of stuff. That just happened to be the same time as stagflation and the oil crisis. And then now, lo and behold, 2024, we're in big economic problems, and it just so happens that the far right is on the rise, and the Tommy Robinson Farage followers are now throwing bricks at mosques. It's a repeatable story, and like when I've made these videos, you start seeing these patterns and you start seeing how it plays out, and it always comes back to economics. And like, look, I have no hatred towards people who are on the right. I actually feel a lot of sympathy to most right-wingers because being where they were, I understand that they've kind of just been manipulated, typically. They've trusted people who present information that try and rile them up, that make a lot of money from doing so, and they distract them from real issues. And the thing is, they're feeling the real issues. The real issues are affecting them, and they're trying to work out why. What is it? And the right will always try and find scapegoats to point at. It always does it. And like, as I've learnt more, as I've read the book from George Monbois, The Hidden Ideology of Neoliberalism, Yanis, I can never say his name, Vokoris or whatever, his book Techno-Feudalism, I kind of realised like the argument should be about economics. The more I learn about the left and right economic theories, the more evidence that I can see that left-wing economics tends to result in better growth and prosperity for all people. Our system currently is great for the 1%. It's great for the ultra-wealthy because it monopolises money into few hands. When you don't have rules to regulate certain businesses, when you tax people less and less, it becomes this like race to the bottom. And there's a funny reason as to why I believe in these kind of left-wing values, and it ties back to my original right-wing ideology, is because of meritocracy. The right always claim to believe in meritocracy, that we should, as a society, reward people who are good at things, right? And I genuinely believe that. However, I don't believe meritocracy exists when some people can inherit the best education, eat the best foods, have time to do sports, be healthy, have time to learn the oboe and the trombone whilst doing the Free Peaks challenge. That person has such an incredible advantage over the person at the bottom of the hierarchy. The person who grew up in poverty, whose dad's in jail, whose mum has to work 3 jobs. That person who then has to leave home at 16 to pay rent and they can't afford to save a single penny. And the fact that this group of people that are living like this is growing, child poverty is growing, I think it's utterly insane to pretend that there is a meritocracy. But the right wing, through a very concerted effort, has brainwashed most of society to believe that this is inevitable. We can't fix this. There's nothing we can do about this. But we know we can. We have in the past. Countries do right now. And so that is where I land. If it means that I now have to wear a badge to show I'm part of the woke brigade, so be it. I've accepted that through actually delving into this stuff, looking into social economic problems, reading papers from academics, not listening to Jordan Peterson tell me that the academia world is overrun by Marxists. I've learned some stuff and I've challenged my way of viewing the world and had to challenge my ego at the same time. So I want to know you guys' evolution. Like, have you always believed in what you believe? Has it ever changed? What changed it? So drop that in the comments below. Join the Discord. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Got a real quick and short video.
Asta cred că l-am mai făcut și ne-am mai tot la el. Dar da, asta cred că o să fie the day. Pentru că na, e the culture shock, să-l numim. Ideology shock, culture shock, however you want to call it. Un stream pe care vreau să-l am destul de regulat în care să vorbesc despre chestii din asta, pentru că mi se pare că ne ducem dracului. și că nu avem, începem să ne îngrijorăm de lucruri de care n-ar trebui să ne îngrijorăm deloc și să nu ne mai îngrijorăm sau să nu ne mai intereseze de lucruri de care ar trebui să ne intereseze întru totul, gen genocid, că se întâmplă deja acolo și că nu face nimeni nimic să-l oprească, adică nu că nu încearcă nimeni să-l oprească, aia care trebuie să încerce să-l oprească nu vor să facă asta, atunci, na, măcar să încerc și eu să raise my voice and talk about it. E ceva ce pe mine mă surprinde când mă uit la videoclipurile astea, și anume că nu au atât de multe view-uri pe cât au celelalte, adică, ok, videoclipul ăsta lui TimmyTheGiant are 1,3 milioane acum 2 luni și oamenii mai comentau la el aici pe canal că Jordan Peterson and Her Majesty said exactly what happened to me if someone else said it. The amount of humility to not only admit that you were wrong, but the compassion to also paint your former side not as villains but misjudged really makes this video top tier. Exact. Pentru că oamenii care ajung să fie în partea de dreapta, la fel, și noi trebuie să ne uităm la ei, nu trebuie să te uiți la ei ca și când, bă, ăștia nu. E pentru că, uite, algoritmii ăștia care sunt pe YouTube și care fac să îți apară videoclipuri din astea cu titluri din astea scandaloase, mie acum am impresia că mi-apar foarte multe din partea stângă cu titluri din astea scandaloase și încerc să mă moderez un pic, altfel ajung în extrem. Așa. Tot ce e moderat, dar cu bun simț și cu, evident, niște valori bazate pe drepturile omului și pe condiții de trai decent, toate astea sunt ok. Adică oamenii care încearcă să-ți spună sau să ne spună că taxarea celor bogați nu va rezolva nimic, ba da. Adică sunt exemple concrete în istorie care ți arată că lumea, nu? Că lumea mergea mai bine înainte pentru că se întâmpla asta, pentru că au ajuns să facă anumite investiții. Și cei din dreapta o să vină și cei din dreapta aspectului politic care sunt la fel, care vor să ajungă și care sunt prieteni cu ăștia bogații, o să zică că da, atunci s-a întâmplat asta pentru că nu era tehnologizarea care s-a întâmplat acum, nu era digitalizare, nu era internet, nu erau ce avem acum că avem asta, trebuie să ne axăm pe sistemul ăsta. Nu e adevărat. Există politici sociale și politicile sociale, de fapt, de asta pe noi ne-a lăsat baltă, să zic așa, sau ne-a dezamăgit cumva politica de stânga și politicienii de stânga, pentru că nu s-au modernizat odată cu tranziția asta economică. Capitalismul a fost foarte ușor să se modernizeze pentru că ghișce business-uri și business-urile, indiferent de natura lor și de ce produc sau ce fac, asta fac profit și mereu o să fac profit. Scaunul meu cred că a explodat. Și efectiv stânga trebuie să muncească cumva mai mult decât dreapta, pentru că dreapta are la bază populismul, are la bază niște lucruri din astea, gen tu trebuie să îți găsești propria libertate economică sau ceva de genul ăsta, ceea ce, ok, bun, dar dacă pornesc dintr-un punct în care nu am acces la asta, ce fac? Dacă nu, cum a zis și el, dacă unul din părinții mei e la pușcărie și celălalt trebuie să muncească 3 joburi, cu ce sunt eu de vină că m-am născut acolo? How is that? Și de asta e vorba, că statul trebuie să asigure lucrurile astea și trebuie să se asigure că oamenii ăia cei mai bogați nu ajung să aibă toată averea. Pentru că se vede deja. Am făcut o tranziție de la burghezia din monarhie, care a fost dată jos de comuniști. Și nu le-a convenit asta la celor mai bogați. Și acum ajungi în capitalism unde bogăția e la corporații. Probabil la un moment dat o să se dea jos și asta și bogăția nu o să mai fie la corporație, să fie la altceva. Și nu în mâna statului sau așa, pentru că în momentul în care bogăția e în mâna statului, bogăția trebuie să fie cumva disipită. Nu poți să pui tot bugetul statului la un om. Dar poți să pui tot bugetul companiei la un om. More or less. Profiturile care sunt, trebuie să-ți plătești și tu niște oameni acolo să lucrezi. Trebuie să plătești taxe câteva. Dar, din nou, sunt numai câteva chestii în care se disipesc banii. Bugetul unui stat trebuie să se ducă în 11.000 de locuri. Pe lângă salariile pe care le plătesc la bugetar, trebuie să se ducă în investiții, trebuie să se ducă în infrastructură, trebuie să se ducă în, nu știu, servicii, tot felul de chestii. E mult mai ușor de controlat din punctul ăsta de vedere decât o companie care are un singur om care conduce tot și dă toate deciziile, sau un board executiv sau un advisory board pe lângă boardul executiv care poate sau nu să fie luat în considerare. Adică uitați-vă la Twitter, scuze, Twitch, nu, please don't close. Uitați-vă la Twitter cum a fost cumpărat de Elon Musk și acum ce se întâmplă când el este efectiv on the top of it. Și și-a făcut încă un cont de Twitch, vă rog, la a treia mă dați afară. Și-a făcut încă un cont de X ca să se susțină pe el și adică un cont fals de X în care el se idolatrizează pe el, dar nu e el, gen, e un cont fake. Dar el l-a creat ca să se dea drept altcineva care îl susține pe Musk, cineva popular. Dar de fapt e el în spatele contului ăla și zice, uite ce tată bun ești. Și acum, după cum vedeți, cu AI și cu toate cele care sunt introduse în social media, vor să manipuleze narrativa și să facă ca atunci când venim cu critici la adresa sistemului ăsta și vrem să nu neapărat îl dăm jos, dar vrem să-l modelăm în așa fel încât să fie bun pentru toată lumea, nu doar pentru ei, o să zică, păi nu, că dacă controlul e la noi, nu poate să ia altcineva mai rău controlul. Cum ar fi socialiștii. Și atunci asta e. This is great. You accidentally educated yourself really effectively because you were genuinely interested in a topic and thinking critically. Great story, mate. Big ups. In 2016, I bought into the whole meme warrior, triggering the left alt-right contrarianism, and then I grew up and realized it's all pretty bullshit. The fact that there are people like you that can change their minds when presented with new information give me some hope. Actually, yes, pentru că sunt și oameni care efectiv nu vor sau se ceartă cu tine pe niște motive stupide. Eu de fiecare dată când, și de asta și engage-uiesc cumva cu alți oameni în comentarii și lumea îmi zice să nu mai fac asta pentru că îmi pierd timpul. Uite, poate îmi place să-mi pierd timpul și merit să mi-o iau în dinți pentru asta. Pentru că le mai dai ceva informații. Nu știu 100% dacă persoana din spatele ecranului e o persoană reală sau nu, dar de multe ori când intru și interacționez cu ei îmi dau seama că e persoană reală pentru că se atacă la emoție. Momentan încă poți să distingi între cine e real și cine nu, pentru că boții de obicei lasă un comentariu 2, maxim 3 și după aia ceau. Persoanele și de obicei sunt din alea mai scurte, așa, etc. Și dacă îi zici să-ți dea o rețetă de ciocolată cu lapte, după chiar îți răspunde cu o rețetă cu ciocolată cu lapte and you realize that it's actually about sau un AI. Dar când intri și te ciondănești cu alții care nu au your viewpoint, nu au valorile tale și nu cred în lucrurile în care crezi tu și vezi că se atacă personal și după când sau ia argumentele tale ca fiind atacul la persoană, atunci îți dai seama că de fapt ai atins un nerv. Și nervul ăla de fapt e că s-ar putea ca ei să nu aibă dreptate. Și atunci ei devin foarte defensivi, încearcă să te put you down, nu mai folosesc argumente concrete, devin insultatori, adică efectiv te insultă pe față, îți zic să intră la tine pe profil dacă l-ai public sau nu. Și, mă rog, nu în sensul că poți să vadă poza de profil, poți să vadă orice despre tine, intră la tine pe profil, văd acolo niște chestii, după aia încep să scrie, uite ce slab ești sau uite cât de te ia vântul, ai o față de maimuță, etc, chestii din asta, pentru că nu mai au argumente, rămân fără argumente și atunci recurg la atac la persoană. Și asta este partea la care dreapta excelează, efectiv la insulte. Se ia de tine, încep să dea vorbe în tine, te fac câine, te pun pe jos, încearcă să dea ștara cu tine. Când arunci cu o inimă înapoi în ei după ce dau cu tine pe jos, le dai scurt circuit. Respectiv te fac gay sau te fac din astea, pleacă de aici că nu-mi placă, bla bla bla, și tu poți să continui să fii nice sau nu. Ideea e să da. Ideea ar fi să fii în continuare. Dar nu, motivul pentru care fac asta e că le mai dai o idee în cap și poate cineva, la un moment dat cineva se uită în ideea aia și zice, bă, dar de ce toți zic asta? Unii poate sunt gen toți zic asta pentru că este îndoctrinare masă, pentru că marxist, pentru că toți citesc cărțile lui Marx. Spoiler, nu? Dar la fel, de fapt nu se uită la ei că ei de fapt asta sunt. Noi suntem doar o mișcare de oameni, adică din punctul meu de vedere, suntem doar o mișcare de oameni care cred în drepturile omului, cred în educație decentă, în trai decent și în efectiv human decency as a whole. Și ajunge efectiv peste oamenii ăștia care nu realizează că ei sunt de fapt într-o bulă și nu doar o bulă, mai multe bule de fapt, pentru că sunt diverse narrative în sensul ăsta care funcționează separat. Pe o parte l-ai pe Peterson, pe altă parte l-ai pe Rogan, pe altă parte l-ai pe Tate, pe altă parte l-ai... care sunt oarecum similare, adică ajung să aibă aceleași argument points, dar care ți le prezintă diferit. Și atunci tu ajungi la același punct, că iei ceva de la Peterson, că iei ceva de la Tate, că iei ceva de la Rogan, că iei ceva de la nu știu ce, că zici, tu în capul tău ai ideea că te duci la surse diferite și că vorbesc chestii diferite, chiar dacă sunt similare în idei și în gândire. Faptul că e de la oameni diferiți te face cumva să te gândești că, I'm not being biased, pentru că iau informația din mai multe părți și atunci e mai ok, pentru că așa văd că toată lumea face, toată lumea zice, e informația din mai multe surse, nu o lua doar de la o sursă, verifică informația și atunci tu o verifici în felul tău, nu o verifici gen Jordan Peterson, nu știu, părere avort și atunci să te uiți leftist avort, părere, ca să compari, să vezi care e treaba cu ele. Tu doar compari ce vezi în bula ta și atunci asta e it's not even gonna work. Și, cumva ei nu realizează că sunt într-o bulă din asta continuă de alt-right media. Și sunt culmea că platformele astea, YouTube și pe cât am zis eu pe YouTube de acum mă aflu într-un pipeline de left-wing pe videos și anticapitalist și tot, ceea ce e weird to see. Pentru că înainte și mie mi se prezentau videoclipuri de Peterson și tot felul de chestii. Mă gândeam și o să fac un podcast, un episod pe tema asta și să zic că și eu efectiv am scăpat din alt-right pipeline, pentru că mai aveam puțin și ajungeam și eu la Peterson. Eu nu am intrat în Peterson, doar m-am uitat la un moment dat la el, la un video sau două mai de mult, pentru că era gen tot așa pe chestii. Adică eram student la științe politice și mi se părea că zicea chestii cool, după aia am auzit niște chestii în timp ce îmi schimbam cumva view-urile și eram what kind of stupid crap is that? Și după evident am dat de românii noștri care erau dubioși dobitoci și care m-au făcut să realizez, ok, nu sunt de dreapta, good. Da, poate o să fac un episod pe tema asta și o să vă explic mai pe delete. Hai să mai citim 2-3 de ăștia și după aia să end up with a bang. I went to uni for economics and you realize that nothing is broken. It's working exactly how it's supposed to, and regular folk are not at the center of that. It cemented my political beliefs. Honestly, I feel this as well. There's a massive stereotype of economic students and graduates being right-wingers, but I feel like it's made me more left-wing. Da, exact. Deci te duci să studiezi economia. Te duci să vezi care să vrei. Și eu la fel la facultate, efectiv, am studiat economia dintr-un punct de vedere foarte antreprenorial, să zic așa, sau foarte, nu știu, macroeconomie. Îți mai dădea așa cum funcționează chestiile. Dar ți se prezentau concepte gen mâna invizibilă, ți se prezentau tot felul de chestii din astea capitaliste, dar nimic de stânga. Niciodată nu ți se aducea într-o balanță să vezi cum era pe vremea socială. Nimeni nu a venit să-ți explice cum, pentru că am aderat la un sistem, eu nici nu-i blamez pe ei cumva pentru chestia asta, pentru că dar mi-ar fi plăcut pentru că adică nu-i blamez pentru că nu-mi prezintă, pentru că eu mă gândesc că profesorii care aleg să nu prezinte asta în curriculă e unul pentru că nu ei fac 100% curricula și că trebuie să conțină anumite elemente și deci noi făcând parte din sistemul ăsta american capitalist, whatever, după Revoluție și după cum să zic, căderea comunismului, automat nu mai ai toate elementele astea în stat și te-ai concentrat pe a crește România capitalist vorbind în sus din ce mai mult și poți să vezi cum România crește de când am ieșit din comunism și mai ales de când am intrat în UE și NATO. Produsul intern brut al României a crescut enorm și comparat cu perioada din care eram în comunism, când produsul intern brut al României ori scădea, ori era foarte alandala. Nici nu prea ai foarte multe numere în perioada aia, pentru că, și respectiv, oamenii nu, chiar dacă, na, GDP-ul crește și noi mergem în sus din punct de vedere al bogăției, bogăția aia, dacă nu ajunge unde trebuie, degeaba avem bogăție. Pentru că putem noi să fim cea mai bogată țară din lume dacă bogăția aia e deținută de companii și ăștia care au efectiv produc și vând în țară. Dacă nu-și plătesc taxele și dacă nu contribuie la efectiv sistemul de welfare din România, de bunăstare din țară, atunci, repet, degeaba, pentru că oamenii nu mănâncă GDP. Oamenii nu-și cumpără chirie cu GDP-ul României. Oamenii nu, degeaba. Faptul că am mers pe o economie bazată pe metrics, pe chestii din astea metrice care se duc doar în sus și să zicem, uite ce bine merge economia. Nu merge bine. Ala nu e o chestie validă după care să ne uităm că bunăstarea oamenilor merge. Sure, e unul dintre ele, dar nu este cea mai importantă metrică. Important este să te uiți și la celelalte, să vezi, ok, banii ăștia pe care România are, produsul intern brut, unde se duce? Pe ce se duce? Cât se duce? De ce se duce acolo? Dacă există infracționalitate, dacă există, nu știu, evaziune fiscală, dacă există... These are the things that we should be looking at, nu la faptul că se duce în sus GDP-ul comparat cu Africa de Sud. Sau comparat cu China, care, mă rog, acum China a depășit America, dar, sau comparat cu Rusia, care, am depășit Rusia, am depășit Ucraina, suntem peste unguri, peste Polonia, peste nu știu ce, oh my god. Da. Deci să avem taxe care sunt folosite într-un mod ok și într-un mod corect de către oameni, pentru că altfel degeaba plătim taxe, honestly. Your point about the 60s being a great time because they invested in public infrastructure is the thing everyone needs to understand. Ignoring that fact is what large corporations want. Da. De acord. This is what Kamala Harris wanted to do, but America fell for the okie dokie for the orange thing. Those tariffs they're cheering for will be wild for the CPI. I struggle to understand the pull of the alt-right. This was helpful. Honestly. Yeah. Fell down the same pipeline, crawled out, humbled, and better for it. Thanks for this video. Doing a presentation on 9/11 at 30 is funny as hell. Honestly, yeah. Ce a zis Warren Buffett în 2006 la New York Times? There's class warfare, alright, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war and we're winning. A zis asta Warren Buffett? There's no way. No, not potential. Stop. Holy shit. Chiar au zis asta. Mad. 2006. Mad. Bro actually said this. Even though it turned out that Mr. Buffett with immense income from dividends and capital gains paid far less as a fraction of his income than the secretaries or the clerks or anyone else in his office. Further, in conversation, it came up that Mr. Buffett doesn't use any tax planning at all. He just pays as the Internal Revenue Code requires. How can this be fair? He asked of how little he pays relative to his employees. How can this be right? Even though I agree with him, I warned that whenever someone tried to raise the issue, he or she was accused of fomenting class welfare. Și Warren Buffett a zis, there's class warfare, alright. But it's my class, the rich class that's making war and we're winning. N-o zis-o... He didn't... Ok. Nu a zis-o la modul de... El era pentru creșterea taxelor pentru bogați, cred, nu? Not long ago I had the pleasure of... Ca să vedem backstory, ca să înțeleg mai bine. I had the pleasure of a lengthy meeting with one of the smartest men on the planet, Warren Buffett, the chief executive of Berkshire Hathaway, in his unpretentious office in Omaha. We talked of many things that I hope will inspire me for years to come, but one of the main subjects was taxes. Mr. Buffett, who probably does not feel sick when he since he's smarter car built in his mailbox the way I do, is at least as excited about the tax system as I am. Put simply, the rich pay a lot of taxes as a total percentage of taxes collected, but they don't pay a lot of taxes as a percentage of what they can afford to pay, or as a percentage of what the government needs to close the deficit gap. Mr. Buffett compiled a data sheet of the men and women who work in his office. He had each of them make a fraction. The numerator was how much they paid in federal income tax and in payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare. And the denominator was their taxable income. The people in his office were mostly secretaries and clerks, though not all. It turned out that Mr. Buffett, with immense income for dividends and capitals, paid far less taxes. Okay. And his secretaries or clerks or anyone else in his office. Further, in conversation, it came up that Mr. Buffett doesn't use any planning at all. He just pays as the Internal Revenue Caps requires. How can this be fair? He asked of how little he pays relative to his employees. How can this be right? So, ok, deci el se uită la acest Internal Revenue Code, which Federal Tax Law in the Internal Revenue Code. Deci nu e ceva de companie, e ceva pus de către IRS. The Constitution gives Congress the power to tax. Congress typically enacts federal tax law in the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. The IRC can be found normal taxes. Right, bro, how many tax on corporations? Tax on individuals. Ce? Oh, ok, mă rog. Ideea e că există un... Nu știam ce este acest Internal Revenue Code, aparent este o chestie în sistemul de taxe american care vă specifică cât să plătești. Deci el se uită acolo, vede cât trebuie să plătească și plătește. Și se întreabă cum poate să fie asta corect, pentru că el plătește atât de puțin comparat cu angajații lui. How can this be right? Even though e așa, there is a clash. Și după aia spune că există un război între clase și este clasa lui, clasa celor bogați care face războiul, care începe războiul și care câștigă. This conversation keeps coming back to mind because in the last couple of weeks I have been on one television panel after another talking about how questionable it is that the country is enjoying what economists call full employment while we are still running a federal budget deficit of around 434 de miliarde for fiscal 2006, not counting off budgets like Social Security and economics forecast that it will grow până în 2010 de 500 de miliarde. When I mentioned on these panels that we should consider all options for closing this gap, including raising taxes, particularly for the wealthiest people, I was met with several arguments by people who call themselves conservatives and free marketers. One argument was that the mere suggestion constituted class warfare. Well, I think Mr. Buffett answered that one. Another argument was that raising taxes actually lowers total revenue, and that only cutting taxes stimulates federal revenue. What? This is supposed to be provided by the history of tax receipts since my friend George Bush became president. Sincer. Oh. The sad fact is that spending, the third argument that kind will, meaning people made in response to the idea of rolling. Rolling better was this: don't raise taxes, cut spendings. Ok. Aș fi de acord cu asta. Într-o oarecare măsură. Tot cred că ar trebui să crește un anumit procentaj de taxe, dar și în același timp să cut spending. The sad fact is that spending rises every year, no matter what people want or say they want. Every president and every member of Congress promises to cut needless spending, but spending has risen ever since 1940, except for a few years after World War II and a brief period after the Korean War. The final argument is the one I really love. People ask how I can be a conservative and still want higher taxes. It makes my head spin, and I guess it shows how old I am. But I thought that conservatives were supposed to like balanced budgets. I thought it was the conservative position to not leave heavy indebtedness to our to our grandchildren. I thought it was the conservative view that there should be some balance between income and outflow. When did this change? Oh, now, I recall. It changed when we figured that we could cut taxes and generate so much revenue that we would balance the budget. But isn't that what doctors call magical thinking? Haven't the facts provided that this theory, though charming and beguiling, was wrong? This brings me back to Mr. Buffett. In fact, it's all just a giveaway to the rich masquerading as a new way of stimulating the economy and balancing the budget. Please, Mr. Bush, let's rethink it. I don't like paying $7 billion a week and interest on the debt. I don't like the idea that Mr. Buffett pays a lot less taxes in tax as a percentage of his income than my housekeeper does or than I do. Can we really say that we're showing fiscal prudence? Are we doing our best? If not, why not? I don't want class warfare from any direction through the tax system or in any way. Asta e un articol destul de bun. Honestly, from a conservative point of view, Ben Stein, what are you doing, buddy? 2008. Pare că în 2009 are we killing the patient? Da, pare că pare că da. Honestly, l-aș păstra pe ăsta. În fine, cu toate astea, let me just go back to me cam. Ok, lejer. Quick thing, ca să par și eu ca Jordan Peterson cu cărțile ăștia în spatele meu, adică inteligent, dar mă rog. Mersi mult că vă uitați la chestiile astea și că mă încurajați, să zic așa, pentru ceea ce fac. Adică, honestly, nu e foarte, să zic așa, încurajant să văd că de multe ori sunt doar eu aici și de multe ori nu interacționează în chat nimeni sau chestii, dar pe de altă parte mie chiar îmi place să mă uit la videoclipurile astea și că îmi place să las o amprentă digitală pe undeva pe unde merg, chiar dacă la un moment dat s-ar putea să nu mai existe amprenta asta digitală, ori din cauza AI-ului, ori din cauza whatever, cine o să preia conducerea corporațiilor ăsta pe viitor, când o să mergem și o să plece ăștia cât de cât decenți de acum, dacă îi poți numi așa. So then again, mersi că vă uitați, voi care sunteți și vă uitați. Și mâine nu o să ne vedem, pentru că mâine e duminică și vreau să take some time off from the camera and live stream. S-ar putea să fac un podcast, who knows. dar cel puțin de la live-uri o să iau o pauză până luni, când o să revin cu un stream de ziua mea de naștere, în care o să găsesc o cauză, am un aminte deja la care whoever wants to contribute can. I will try to contribute myself to it, though I will definitely see. So then again, thank you, and I shall see you when I see you, luni, probabil. Adios. Oh, da, trebuia să continuăm cu jocurile. Oops. Da, I don't know I don't know what that's gonna be like. With the games and everything. So, azi trebuia teoretic să mai băgăm niște joculețe și așa. Dar eu zic că e destul. Eu zic că e destul. Am făcut deja, asta ne apropiem de 3 ore cu chestia asta. Și n-aș vrea să mă întind mai mult. Deja am făcut un stream de 4 ore, dar ar fi deja 4 ore jumate. Ar fi deja aproape 8 ore de stream azi, ca o zi de lucru întreagă. So, again, thank you for watching. I shall see you on Monday. Adios.